Chapter 369. When Princess Carol heard Leng Shiqi's words, a huge wave was set off in her heart. If there were only a few people who knew her true appearance, then there was only one person who knew that she was Mo Huisho. That was her mother, Princess Bess. Other than that, there was no third person who knew about this. More importantly, if this news reached the ears of the Dark Thunder Guards, then the Princess Bess would completely become the Dark Thunder Guards' enemy. It would even implicate the entire Zhulu country. The consequences were simply unimaginable. Princess Carol looked deeply at Leng Shiqi, boundless killing intent rising in her heart. Leng Shiqi gave a mysterious smile and said, "Princess Carol or Mo Huisho, the information I have is far beyond your imagination. If I'm not wrong, the Dark Thunder Guards entered the palace yesterday to investigate the cause of the king's death. I'm afraid that they found out about the Princess Bess." Princess Bess really lifted a stone and smashed it on her own foot. "Of course you can also try to kill me if you can." Princess Carol increasingly felt that the person in front of her was very mysterious. It seemed that there was nothing he didn't know. Many people knew that the Dark Thunder Guards entered the palace, but the results of their investigation showed that no more than 10 people knew about it. How did the other party find out about all these extremely secretive matters? How did he find out about all of this? Leng Shiqi looked at Princess Carol's expression and knew that he had guessed correctly. He had been at Gu God Peak for more than a day. How could he know about the palace? He just linked all the things together and made a judgment. Yu Ruifeng and Yuan Song were both outstanding talents in the Dark Thunder Guards. Otherwise they wouldn't have their current high positions. After entering the palace, they must have found some clues that were unfavorable to the Princess Bess. Otherwise, why would Princess Carol leave the city in such a panic? The Princess Bess was her only support now, so something that could make her panic must have happened to the Princess Bess. The killing intent in Princess Carol's heart grew stronger. She said, "What do you want?" "As I said earlier, I can help your highness or harm Mo Huisho," Leng Shiqi said. "The choice is actually in your highness' hands." Princess Carol's expression changed several times. The feeling of being manipulated was very uncomfortable. She was also in a hurry to go to the Gu God Peak and didn't want to delay any longer. However, Leng Shiqi's words gave her too much shock and threat, so she had no choice but to stop here. She said with a sullen face, "I naturally hope that your excellency can help me, but I don't know how your excellency will help me, and what do you need me to pay?" Leng Shiqi straightened his sleeves and said leisurely, "This one is helping Princess Carol keep all of this a secret." "Isn't this helping her highness?" Princess Carol finally understood. It turned out that this person was here to get something without risking anything. She gritted her teeth and said hatefully, "What do you want, your excellency? Please tell me directly. Your highness is truly intelligent, to be able to see through my thoughts in an instant. I'm impressed." Leng Shiqi smiled, "I'm just curious about the goo worms on your highness." "Goo worm?" Princess Carol was dazed at first, but then her expression turned gloomy. For people who cultivated goo techniques, goo worms were their second lives. If they nurtured a powerful goo worm suitable for themselves, their battle strength would increase greatly. Similarly, if they lost their goo worms, their battle strength would decrease greatly. Thus, people who cultivated goo techniques placed great importance on their goo worms. This was like a sword cultivator's sword, they couldn't allow others to covet it. At the same time she had some doubts. Although she had only fought with Leng Shiqi once, she could sense that Leng Shiqi cultivated a cold-ean cultivation method. Then what did he need goo worms for? Thus she asked, "Your excellency doesn't cultivate goo techniques, what do you need goo worms for?" Leng Shiqi wasn't willing to answer and said coldly, "Your highness, you only need to answer whether I agree or not." Princess Carol had never suffered such humiliation before. She was about to speak when Leng Shiqi spoke first. "I only want 10 spirit-devouring goo worms and those goo worms that can turn into wings. With these, I can guarantee that I will immediately leave Zhulu country and the news of you being Mo Huisho will be kept forever." "What did you say?" Princess Carol spat out these words one by one. Not to mention how precious those spirit-devouring goo were and how hard it was for her to nurture them. There was also that goo worm that could turn into wings. It was the soaring sky goo that the princess had spent a large amount of resources to exchange for. She had only used it once, how could she give it to someone else? Moreover, even if she gave it to him, how could she be sure that he wasn't lying to her? At this time, Leng Shiqi saw that she was deep in thought and continued, "I have to remind your highness that you don't have much time." Hearing this, Princess Carol clenched her fists tightly. She knew that her time was precious. She had already been delayed for a while and her spirit horse had died. If she didn't hurry to Gushin Peak now, her mother would really be in danger. Suddenly, she realized that she seemed to have experienced this situation before. She recalled that she had also met a mysterious person outside Lanchi City who was also at the late stage of Spirit Vein Realm. He had also used information to threaten her. Princess Carol couldn't help but show some suspicion. Were there too many mysterious people in this world, or was she so unlucky to always meet such people? Or could it be that there was no connection between the two of them? She didn't forget that she had once handed over the 10,000 spirit-devouring goo technique in Lanchi City. Now someone was asking for goo worms from her. This was too much of a coincidence. However, these two people's cultivation methods were completely different. They were even polar opposites, so it was impossible for them to be the same person. Lung Shichi saw the suspicion in Princess Carol's eyes and his heart tightened. He was afraid that she would guess something, so he coldly snorted and said, "Princess Carol, Your Highness, you still need to think carefully. It seems that Your Highness still needs to consider it slowly. Then I'll go to the post house in King City. I believe that the Dark Thunder Guard should be more generous." Princess Carol instantly collected all her thoughts. She looked slightly flustered and hurriedly shouted, "Wait! I can agree to your conditions, but how can you guarantee that you won't leak it out? This one has always been a man of his word. Or rather, everyone in our organization is a man of his word. I think Your Highness should have experienced it in Lanchi City." Lung Shichi was full of nonsense and forced himself to come up with an organization. Princess Carol was shocked. He really is in cahoots with the person who stopped me in Lanchi City? However, she believed it because after the last transaction, she had indeed successfully escaped from the Western Desolate Province. After hesitating for a while, she said, "I can give you goo worms, but I have a condition." Chapter 370. The reason why Ling Shichi came up with this organization was actually a little helpless, because he was always pulling wool from a sheep. And just now, Princess Carol had already begun to suspect him, so he simply made up an organization which could not only cover up the lie, but also make Princess Carol feel more at ease giving him the goo worms. Hearing that Princess Carol still had conditions, he pretended to be displeased and said, "Let's hear it. Your Excellency wants to get the spirit-devouring goo and the soaring sky goo with just one mouth. The value of each of these goo worms is no less than a 5th-tier spirit weapon. Shouldn't Your Excellency take out something?" Lung Shichi said coldly, "Your Highness, are you bargaining? On the other hand, I can slowly negotiate with Your Highness for an entire day without any problems. However, Your Highness doesn't seem to have so much time." This time, Princess Ka Luo smiled and said, "I knew you would say that. My condition is very simple. Right now, most of the experts in the Goo God Peak are not here. At most, there are a few Spirit Aperture Realm spirit cultivators guarding it. Your Excellency only needs to help me lure those people out. Of course, the more people you lure out, the better. As long as Your Excellency agrees, I can give you the spirit-devouring goo and the soaring sky goo now. After the matter is done, I can also give you a mind control goo." Hearing this, Lung Shichi was really moved. He had personally experienced the power of the mind control goo, so he naturally thought of it. And he also guessed that Princess Carol probably wanted to sneak into the Goo God Peak to get something, but he couldn't easily believe her. Princess Carol has the mind control goo? Not now, but when Your Excellency leads away the spirit cultivators on the Goo God Peak, there will be. Princess Carol chuckled. With my insignificant cultivation base, how can I hold back several Spirit Aperture Realm experts? Your Highness, you must be joking. Your Excellency comes and goes like a ghost. I don't think this matter will be difficult for Your Excellency. Moreover, Your Excellency knows what the mind control goo is. As long as you can lure away the experts of the Goo God Peak for a period of time, you will be able to get it. You will make a lot of money." Lung Shichi pondered for a moment. He calculated that he wouldn't lose anything in this deal. Moreover, it wouldn't be troublesome to lure those experts away. He nodded and said, "Deal." Next, Princess Ka Luo straightforwardly took out 10 spirit-devouring goo and over 100 soaring sky goo, saying, "I believe you are a man of your words, let's go to Gushin Peak now. To be able to travel together with Your Highness, it is the blessing of 3 lifetimes. Unfortunately, I am used to traveling alone, so it is better for us to go our separate ways. Your Highness only needs to hide near Gushin Peak and wait for the right time." "Okay, after the matter is done, let's meet at the pool 10 miles west of the Goo God Peak." After saying that, Princess Carol's spiritual power surged and she quickly left. Lung Shichi looked at Princess Carol's back. After a while, he rushed to the Goo God Peak from another direction. This place was not very far from the Goo God Peak, less than 20 miles away. Leng Shiqi used the ghost spring steps and soon arrived near the mountain gate. He used the white eye to avoid Princess Carol and knew that she was quietly hiding in the dark. Leng Shiqi quietly entered the Goo God Peak again, preparing to lure out the experts. But he didn't know that after Princess Carol quietly waited for a while, she sneered and then left at an even faster speed. After Leng Shiqi entered the Goo God Peak, he used the white eye and quickly found a person's aura. That person was Zhao Ying. And this person was the key to Leng Shiqi luring out the experts of the Goo God Peak. At this moment, Zhao Ying had just walked out of a palace. This was the place where the sound transmission formation was set up. He used the sound transmission formation to inform the King City branch about the strange disciple that he encountered. The higher-ups of the Goo God sect were in the King City. He believed that there would be a result soon. However, at this moment, an evil ghost figure floated away. Zhao Ying's expression changed slightly. He was about to chase after it, but he stopped in an instant. He thought to himself, still want to play this trick of luring the tiger away from the mountain. However, after hesitating for a moment, he still chased after it. After about half an incense stick's time, a person wearing a chaotic mask appeared. He quickly walked to the hall where the sound transmission formation was placed. However, when he reached the door, a sudden change occurred. A dense group of goo worms suddenly drilled out from the ground. They gathered together to form a human figure. Then, with a flash of light, a person suddenly appeared. It was Zhao Ying who was supposed to leave. As soon as he appeared, he laughed sinisterly. There is a way to heaven but you don't walk, there is no door to hell but you break in. You have already run away but you still dare to come back and cause trouble. Let me beat you up and see what kind of trash you are. Leng Shiqi immediately put on a shocked posture. Why are you here? You dare to attack me? Do you know who I am? Sneaky. Even if your identity is extraordinary, I am still performing the duties of the sect. I am reasonable no matter what you say. After Zhao Ying finished speaking, he waved his hand. The goo worms flew up and formed a small insect cloud that spread out. Leng Shiqi immediately rose up from under his feet. His figure quickly rushed back. At the same time, he surged out a strange rhythm from his mouth, causing the insect cloud to pause and stay in the air. Do you think I will use this method if I know you can control the goo magic sound? Explode. Zhao Ying shouted explosively, and then the cloud of insects that covered the sky suddenly exploded apart. Rolling colorful lights burst out, accompanied by an earth-shaking loud sound, resounding throughout the entire Goo God Peak. Buzz. Leng Shiqi formed a fist seal with his hands. Golden light flowed around his body and condensed into a huge golden seal in front of him, blocking the power of the explosion for him. This was another level 5 spiritual skill attached to the ultimate gold mystic yang skill, the ultimate gold breaking mountain seal. This was a spiritual skill that had both offensive and defensive capabilities. However, this ultimate gold-breaking mountain seal could not completely block the power of the explosion. Leng Shiqi could only retreat and erect an ice wall around his body to be safe. Zhao Ying saw that such a powerful explosion did not injure Leng Shiqi, a spirit pulse realm cultivator, and his face was a little embarrassed. He roared, "You are not using the 10,000 goo spirit devouring technique at all, you are indeed a spy." Leng Shiqi ignored him and turned to run. Zhao Ying shouted fiercely, "Run? Such a big movement has attracted all the disciples in the Goo God Peak. Let's see if you can still go to heaven or earth." He was right. The moment the insect cloud exploded, all the disciples of the Goo God sect rushed over, including 3 spirit aperture realm cultivators and more than 10 spirit pulse realm cultivators. There were also hundreds of disciples below the 4th level of Sky Human Realm. However, Leng Shiqi was secretly smiling. This was the result he wanted. Zhao Ying's actions had saved him a lot of effort. Chapter 371. Today the Goo God Peak was unusually lively. From dozens of Sky Realm experts to hundreds of low-level disciples, they were all looking for a single person. In the end, the sky was dark, but they couldn't even find a shadow. At this time, 4 Spirit Aperture Realm experts were gathered together, including Zhao Ying and Cheng Bai. Zhao Ying's face was extremely ugly. After he fought with Leng Shiqi quickly got rid of him and sank into the ground. He also used the Byakugan and the system map to avoid all the Goo God sect disciples. So after a long time no one could find him. At this time, there was a sudden sound at the foot of the mountain. Found him, found him. He is there, quickly informed the elders. Zhao Ying and the other 3 heard this and rushed over. Not long after, they saw Leng Shiqi being blocked by dozens of Gu God sect disciples. However, there were only a few Spirit Pulse Realm cultivators among these disciples, so they were not in a hurry to make a move. Leng Shiqi saw Zhao Ying and the others rushing over and sneered, "Oh, you guys are quite fast, but do you think you can stop me with just these trash?" Leng Shiqi waved his arm and an endless amount of demonic qi spread out, covering a radius of dozens of feet. Zhao Ying said anxiously, "Not good, he is going to run again." Qing Bai, who was standing beside him, flicked out a few goo worms. Those goo worms kept spinning in the air and stirred up a strong wind. The strong wind blew away the demonic qi in an instant, but Leng Shiqi's figure was already gone. "Damn it," Zhao Ying said angrily. He suddenly squatted down and inserted his arms deep into the ground. Immediately, goo worms poured into the ground. "He must be hiding down there. Watch me pull him out." Hundreds of goo worms drilled into the ground. These goo worms seemed to be suitable for living underground, and their speed was very fast. These goo worms kept spreading underground. Zhao Ying closed his eyes and carefully sensed the information sent back by the goo worms. A few dozen breaths later, his eyes widened and a hint of joy appeared on his face. He shouted, "Still want to hide? Come out." Zhao Ying raised his arms and the ground began to tremble slightly. A huge gully was created on the ground. The ravine continued to extend until it was 300 to 400 feet away. Then Leng Shiqi's figure was forced out. Leng Shiqi said in a surprised but dismissive tone, "You have some skills but it's still useless. I'll take my leave." Then he used the ghostly spring steps with all his might to escape. Leng Shiqi, who had already opened the spirit veins in his legs, was much faster than before. In the blink of an eye, only a blurry figure could be seen. "Just," Zhao Ying ordered. He lifted his foot and was about to give chase. However, Qing Bai, who was beside him, stopped him. "He's already used the tactic of luring the tiger away from the mountain twice. It's hard to say if this isn't the third time. If we all go out, there will only be 5 people guarding the important places of Gushin Peak." The other 2 Spirit Aperture Realm cultivators also nodded. However, Zhao Ying was already on top of his head. He said, "What are you afraid of? His methods are indeed strange, but his cultivation is only at the Spirit Aperture Realm. As long as we restrict him, I can kill him in one move." This person stole the goo worm and wanted to destroy the sound transmission array. He must have been sent by the main combat sect. If we kill him, it will be a great merit. Even if there's an accident, I, Zhao Ying, will take responsibility. Qing Bai and the other 2 looked at each other. Since someone had taken the initiative to take responsibility, they had nothing to say. Just as Zhao Ying said, killing Leng Shiqi could be considered a great merit. They immediately agreed and chased after him with Zhao Ying. Leng Shiqi's speed was indeed fast, even faster than the 4 Spirit Aperture Realm cultivators. However, his goal was not to escape now but to lure them out. Therefore, Leng Shiqi deliberately slowed down a little, maintaining the same speed as Zhao Ying and the others. Gradually, Leng Shiqi led dozens of Gushin sect masters across the mountain gate of Gushin Peak. However, he was surprised to find that he did not see Princess Carol in the field of vision of his Byakugan. It was reasonable to say that she should be lurking near Gushin Peak, ready to go up the mountain at any time. Leng Shiqi secretly guessed that maybe Princess Carol was waiting for an opportunity on the other side of Gushin Peak. He did not care too much and continued to run forward with dozens of people behind him. About an hour later, Leng Shiqi and others had already left Gushin Peak for some distance. He was about to get rid of Zhao Ying and the others completely and then go to the pool mentioned by Princess Carol, but an accident happened. A few miles away, dozens of Spirit Aperture Realm cultivators suddenly appeared. What shocked him the most was that there were oneness of heaven and man and several Spirit Astral Realm cultivators among them. As for the rest, they were all in Spirit Aperture Realm and Spirit Pulse Realm. And the leader of oneness of heaven and man was Prince Heli. Seeing this scene, Leng Shiqi was shocked, but he soon realized that he had been fooled by Princess Carol. Princess Carol did not come to Gushin Peak to get anything at all. Her purpose was to draw out the masters of Gushin Peak. But she met Leng Shiqi on the way, so she left the dangerous task to him. Leng Shiqi also secretly hated himself for having a preconceived idea. He subconsciously thought that Princess Carol came to Gushin Peak to get something or meet someone, so he did not think too much about it. He secretly smiled bitterly. He did not expect that the sheep he had been collecting wool from had schemed against him. Leng Shiqi could only blame himself for being a little careless and falling into this trap because he was too greedy for the mind-controlling insect. But fortunately, his life was not in danger, and he could take this opportunity to see what the Jingoists were up to. Leng Shiqi deliberately slowed down at this time, pretending that his spiritual power was exhausted. Seeing this, Zhao Ying immediately showed a crazy smile. When they were about to approach Leng Shiqi's figure directly disappeared into the ground. Zhao Ying sneered, still using such a low-level method. Just as he was about to pull out Leng Shiqi, a huge aura like flowing fire rushed over. Zhao Ying's expression changed slightly. He looked over and saw dozens of people in black rushing over quickly. The person in the lead was in oneness of heaven and man. Before that person even got close, Zhao Ying and the others dared to feel that blazing killing intent. Those people were coming for them. Zhao Ying and the other 3 spirit aperture realm cultivators immediately leaned together. They all looked dignified. The other party obviously came with ill intentions, but they foolishly ran out of Gushin Peak and lost the protection of the sect protecting array. This was not luring the tiger away from the mountain, it was clearly luring the snake out of its hole. Chapter 372. Soon, under the night sky, the 2 groups of people confronted each other. The number of people in the 2 groups was about the same, and they were all spirit cultivators in the celestial realm. However, the gap between them was huge. There were only 4 spirit aperture realm cultivators in the Gu God sect, and the rest were in the spirit pulse realm. However, the other side had masters in the unity of heaven and man realm and gang spirit realm. Just these few people could easily kill dozens of people in the Gu God sect. Zhao Ying and the other 3 people's expressions had already sunk to the bottom. They all knew that they had been fooled. The purpose of the other side was to lure them out of the Gu God Peak and then destroy them in one fell swoop. As long as these spirit cultivators in the celestial realm were killed, the low-level disciples in the Gu God Peak would be a group of lambs waiting to be slaughtered. Zhao Ying's face was not only gloomy, but also hot. If he had not been so impulsive, they would not have come out in full force. At this moment he really hated Leng Shiqi and himself. Zhao Ying whispered, "I will stop them. You guys go back to the Gu God Peak and open the sect protection array." Since he had made such a serious mistake, he would take the corresponding responsibility. Although his voice was low, it was still heard by Prince Heli. However, he was masked at this time, so the people in the Gu God sect did not know his identity. Prince Heli suppressed his voice and said, "Ridiculous, you want to stop me?" He punched out, and the violent fist force attracted a trace of the power of heaven and earth. It turned into a flame python that lit up the night sky and swept over with killing intent. "Go!" Zhao Ying shouted, and countless goo worms suddenly drilled out of his body. Those goo worms did not fly out, but gnawed at his own flesh and blood. And his aura was constantly rising. He was sacrificing his own flesh and blood in exchange for great power. Prince Heli said disdainfully, "Insignificant skill." Unfortunately, no matter how strong Zhao Ying's aura was, he was still in the spirit aperture realm. Facing the flame python, he did not even have a chance to attack before he was ruthlessly swallowed up. In an instant he died without a complete corpse. The unity of heaven and man realm was so powerful. Cheng Bai's group and the remaining spirit pulse stage disciples all had ashen faces. It was as if they could already see their miserable deaths. However, they would definitely not sit still and wait for death. Everyone burst forth with the fastest speed in their lives, wanting to escape from this place. At this moment, after Leng Shiqi sank into the ground, he continued to dive. He knew that there would definitely be a fight above. The fight between the masters of the unity of heaven and man realm would definitely be earth-shattering. He was afraid that he would be affected. At the same time, he kept his supercilious eye open to observe the situation above him. When he saw Zhao Ying being killed in one move, his heart suddenly quivered. At this point, he guessed that the princess consort's faction had already secretly joined forces with the pro-war faction. Perhaps when Wang Fei roped in the Dark Thunder Guards, they were already mixed together. Now that he thought about it, the scene of the 3 parties gathering at the courier station that day, those people were all best actors. This was especially true for Prince Heli. Although he looked like a rough and burly man, he was extremely meticulous on the inside. He was also very good at acting, which was really admirable. When Prince Heli saw that Cheng Bai and the others were about to escape, he laughed maniacally. "Today none of you will be leaving." He threw out a few punches, instantly breaking mountains and rivers. Blazing fists soared into the sky. Several flame pythons intertwined under the night sky, as if they were going to tear apart the night sky. Facing Prince Heli, Cheng Bai and the others had no resistance at all. Just as they were about to be swallowed by the flame pythons, a strange goo worm the size of a head suddenly appeared between the two. The goo worm was as weak as an ant in front of the flame pythons, but it was this small goo worm that took the initiative to fly into the flame pythons. Even more amazing was that this goo worm was like a black hole. Before it even touched the flame pythons, it was torn apart and finally completely swallowed. An insignificant goo worm actually swallowed Prince Heli's full force attack. Cheng Bai and the others were first stunned, but when they recognized the goo worm, they all turned to joy. Prince Heli's expression became serious. This is the spirit-devouring goo. No, it's the spirit-devouring goo king. That's right, it's the spirit-devouring goo king. A cold voice came from the sky. Then the whole sky suddenly buzzed loudly. Layers of goo worms formed a bug cloud that covered the sky in the blink of an eye. Among them, dozens of figures descended from the sky. The leader was the leader of the Goo God sect, Sang He Tong. These people were the top experts of the Goo God sect who had sneaked into the King City from the beginning. Looking carefully, other than Sang He Tong, who was at the unity of heaven and man realm, the great elder of the Goo God sect was also there. His cultivation was also at the unity of heaven and man realm. In addition, there were several spirit astral realm cultivators, a dozen spirit aperture realm cultivators, and the rest were spirit pulse realm cultivators. In addition to Cheng Bai and the others, there were more than 100 experts in the Goo God sect. Just in terms of fighting strength, the Goo God sect had almost twice as many people as Prince Heli. Lung Shichi, who was hiding below, was shocked when he saw this scene. Looking at the current situation, the leader of the Goo God sect, Sang He Tong, clearly knew about Prince Heli's plan to lure the snake out of its hole. Sang He Tong was a young man with a white face and no beard. He looked harmless. At this moment he had a cold smile on his face. Prince Heli, as a prince, you don't dare to show your true face. You are a disgrace to your status as a prince. Prince Heli didn't say anything. He took off the black mask on his head and showed his true face. At the moment Sang and Tong appeared here, he knew that they'd actually been tricked. Prince Heli had joined hands with the princess consort and the Dark Thunder Guards to put on a show. They wanted to eliminate the low-level disciples of the Goo God sect and destroy the Goo God Peak so that Sang and Tong would lose their support. Therefore they had a plan to lure the snake out of its hole. Unfortunately, they were checkmated by Sang He Tong. Sang He Tong laughed loudly. Ha, Heli, you guys tried so hard to cut off my escape route, but you didn't know that I was also luring the snake out of its hole. I purposely moved more than 80% of the experts into the King City. You thought that you were aware of it, but in fact, I purposely let you know. Otherwise, how could you leave the city so easily? As long as we kill you, the prince, and the experts, what ability does your main fighting faction have to fight for the throne with us? Prince Heli and the spirit cultivators behind him felt as if a mountain was pressing down on their hearts. Just as Sang He Tong said, they were going to die here tonight. However, Prince Heli naturally wouldn't sit still and wait for death. He bellowed, Sang He Tong, even if you are stronger, do you think it will be so easy to kill me? Even if I die, I will drag you down with me. Sang He Tong tilted his head and laughed, then let's try. With that, he moved his hands and a spider web that was dozens of meters long appeared in the air. Each spider web was covered with layers of goo worms. Chapter 373. Sang and Tong's attack was like a signal for all the experts of the Goo God sect to rush over. Prince Heli roared. With a whoosh, his entire body ignited in flames. He bathed in the flames like a god of war. He stomped on the ground and shot out like a cannonball. Sang and Tong moved his finger, and the dark spider web in the sky trembled. Then thousands of green lights shot out from it, crisscrossing as they rained down. Prince Heli was like a small boat in a raging sea that could capsize at any time. However, he charged at Sang and Tong like a shooting star, ignoring the sharp green lights. At this moment, the Goo God sect's Grand Elder Yale, who was standing near Sang and Tong, also made his move. With a point of his finger, demonic energy and green light surged. Instantly, the demonic light illuminated the world and formed a terrifying parasite that was dozens of feet tall. It opened its bloody mouth and was about to swallow Prince Heli. Scram! Prince Heli roared and smashed his fists. Heaven and earth seemed to tremble slightly. His fists were like dragons and a fiery sun dragon soared into the sky. In the blink of an eye, it shattered Yale's goo shadows. There was a difference between unity of heaven and man. It was obvious that Yale was weaker than Prince Heli. However, Yale's goal wasn't to injure Prince Heli. It was enough for him to stop Prince Heli, even if it was only for a moment. At the same time, Sang and Tong formed a seal with both hands. The dozens of giant webs in the sky suddenly shrank. At the same time, a formless sticky force appeared around them. Prince Heli immediately felt his movements become sluggish. Moreover, as the spider web became smaller and smaller, the stickiness also became stronger and stronger. Not good. Prince Heli knew he was best at close combat for a short period of time. If he was restrained, it was only a matter of time before he was ground to death by Sang, Tong, and Yeer. However, he was already deep in the spider web. It was too late for him to retreat now. What should he do? Drip. Suddenly, a drop of water seemed to fall from the sky. However, no one noticed it in the midst of the intense battle. Drip, drip. However, the sound of dripping water kept coming. In just a few breaths of time, it began to rain. Sang, Tong, Yale, and Prince Heli all raised their heads to look. They all sensed that the rainwater wasn't rainwater, but some kind of spirit technique condensed from spirit energy. However, the three of them had different expressions. Sang, Tong, and Yer had grave expressions on their faces, while Prince Heli's face was filled with joy. They knew that there was only one person in the Zhu Road who could use such a spell, and that was Prince Gus. Then the rain suddenly became heavier and turned into a torrential downpour. The most terrifying thing was that the raindrops had all turned into deadly weapons. Every raindrop was like a small knife that could cut through everything. Strangely, a layer of blue light flashed across the bodies of Prince Heli and his masked men, and the knife-like raindrops passed through them. But the Goo God Sect's people didn't have it easy. First of all, Sang and Tong's giant net was destroyed in an instant. Yell kept chanting incantations and groups of goo bugs flew out around him, protecting everyone in the center. But at every moment, large numbers of goo worms fell to the ground, and soon the ground was covered in a layer of goo worm corpses. Sang He Tong's eyes flashed with green light. He looked around and suddenly, his gaze locked onto a certain spot in the air. Humph, come out. A pair of wings that were over 6 meters long spread out from his back, and upon closer inspection, these wings were completely made of goo worms. It was the soaring sky goo that Leng Shiqi had obtained not long ago. However, Sang He Tong's soaring sky goo far surpassed Leng Shiqi in both quantity and quality. Sang He Tong flew to the sky and waved his hands. 2 green lightning bolts that were as thick as buckets streaked across the night sky. Strangely, the green lightning bolts struck at a lump of air. However, an aqua-blue hand appeared in the void and crushed the 2 green lightning bolts. At the same time, a figure appeared there. It was Prince Gus. The moment Prince Gus appeared, the situation changed. Although they only had one more person, Sang He Tong knew that since Prince Gus appeared, he would not be able to kill Prince Heli. Sang He Tong and Prince Heli were both at Heaven Man Unity late stage, while Prince Gus and Yell were at Heaven Man Unity middle stage. Prince Gus might be weaker than Sang He Tong, but he was a spirit mage. A Heaven Man Unity stage spirit mage alone was comparable to an army of thousands. Sang He Tong said darkly, Prince Gus has also become a coward, but I wonder if your highness has just arrived, or have you been here all along? His words didn't sound good to Prince Heli's ears. If Prince Gus had just arrived because he sensed danger, then so be it, but if he had arrived long ago, then this was something worth thinking about. Prince Gus first glanced at Prince Heli before saying to Sang He Tong, I have indeed arrived long ago, the reason why I did not make a move was to keep you here. Just as he finished speaking, with him as the center, water curtains rose into the sky in a radius of several hundred meters. In an instant, water vapor covered the sky and formed a water prison, trapping everyone inside. Prince Gus said in a deep voice, Sang He Tong, you are underestimating me too much. You brought so many experts of the Goo God sect into King City. This action is too careless and eye-catching, as if you are purposely telling us that you have no one behind you. You want to beat us at our own game to lure out some of our experts and eliminate them, but you don't know that I am also going to beat you at your own game and lure you, the sect master, out. Ha 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 ha. Hearing this, Sang He Tong laughed wildly. You make it sound good, but so what? Do you think you can change the situation just because you are here? My Goo God sect's experts are still several times more than yours. As long as we delay you and Prince Heli, your experts will be killed by us sooner or later. Prince Gus shook his head lightly. You think you are smart, but since I want to beat you at your own game, why would I come alone? Consort, please show yourself. The air beside Prince Gus suddenly twisted, and a dozen figures walked out. The one standing at the front was the elegant best consort. Prince Gus came with the Imperial Guards. He knew that the Goo God sect was trying to lure Prince Heli out, so he deliberately beat them at their own game. The sect master sneered. Both sides were evenly matched. Consort came with the elite troops. The Dark Thunder Guards appeared and stood on the side of the Goo God sect, but the Dark Thunder Guards attacked the Goo God sect. Their strength was overwhelming. The Gu God sect fled, and Leng Shiqi quietly appeared and communicated with Yu Ruifeng. Chapter 374. The Queen's faction was the weakest among the three factions fighting for the throne. The two princes of the pro-war faction were masters of oneness of heaven and man. They had military power and were the strongest. The Gu God sect of the peace faction was not as strong as the pro-war faction in terms of overall strength. However, the Gu God sect was also the national religion of Zhulu country. Many ordinary people in Zhulu country believed in the Gu God sect. The other leader of the peace faction, Chu Li, was not strong, but he was an elder of Zhulu country. Half of the important ministers in the court were his disciples. Therefore, the peace faction had the support of the ministers and the people. However, the Queen's faction had neither military power nor the support of important ministers. Only a few relatives stood behind the Queen. They could not compare with the pro-war faction and the peace faction. However, the princess consort had something that everyone yearned for even in their dreams, the Wang Ling. The king died unexpectedly. The new king had not appeared, so the king's token was in the Queen's hands. With the king's token, she called in the lords of the 4 citadels and their subordinates. There were 17 people in total. Among these people, the 4 city lords were all in the gang spirit realm, and the others were in the spiritual aperture realm, which was a very powerful force. With the appearance of such a force, the advantage of the Gu God sect was almost gone. Sang He-tong looked gloomy when he saw the Queen's people appear out of nowhere. The two sides were almost equal in strength. His plan to kill Prince Heli had completely failed. He said sternly, "Queen Bess, do you know how stupid your choice is? Do you really think Gus and Heli will let you go?" Queen Bess said coldly, "Sang He-tong, you secretly cast Gu on me and His Majesty. You are the murderer who murdered His Majesty. Tonight's matter has nothing to do with the fight for the throne. We want to kill you, the evil thief who killed the king and usurped the throne." Sang and Tong let out a soft cry of surprise. "You found out so quickly?" "Oh yes, with the Dark Thunder Guards it is possible. You are indeed the Dark Thunder Guards. However, you want to kill me? Wishful thinking. You will be the ones to die. Everyone come out." Right at this moment, the auras of a few spirit pulse stage cultivators who were originally among the Gu God sect's disciples suddenly surged. 6 of them were in the spirit aperture realm, 1 was in the gang spirit realm, and 1 was in the unity of heaven and men realm. This person was none other than Yu Ruifeng. These people were actually from the Dark Thunder Guards. The other person in gang spirit realm was naturally Yuan Tsang. In fact, Yuan Tsang and several Dark Thunder Guards in spiritual aperture realm couldn't control the situation here. However, Yu Ruifeng, this Heaven Man Unity Realm great expert, was completely different. His appearance alone was enough to reverse the entire battle situation. Now that the Gu God sect had 3 realm of unity of heaven and man, they only needed 2 of them to hold back Prince Gus and Prince Heli, and the remaining 1 would be able to slaughter the Jingoists. Seeing this, whether it was Prince Gus, Prince Heli or Princess Consort, they were all shocked. The Dark Thunder Guards actually stood on the side of the Gu God sect. When Sang He-tong saw these people's expressions as if they had eaten a fly, he immediately laughed wantonly. "Ah, how ridiculous. Why do you think the Dark Thunder Guards could find out the cause of the king's death in one day? Of course, I deliberately leaked it out." At this point, Bess and the others' expressions turned even uglier. "Princess Bess, it's really beyond my expectation that you can bring several city lords here, but in front of absolute strength, this little plot is nothing." Princess Bess looked deeply at Yu Ruifeng. She gritted her teeth and said, "Lord Yu, is your Dark Thunder Guards really going to openly intervene in the internal affairs of Zhulu country?" Yu Ruifeng said expressionlessly, "Princess, you're wrong. The Dark Thunder Guards were personally invited into the palace by you. From that moment on, the Dark Thunder Guards couldn't get away." "Good for you, Yu Ruifeng." At this time, Prince Heli shouted angrily, "It turns out that when you were in the post house, you promised Princess Bess on the surface, but in fact, you had secretly colluded with the Gu God sect." Sang He-tong interrupted. "Colluded? Didn't the 2 princes also collude with the princess? They even put on a show together at the post house. It's really disgusting. Enough, I don't want to waste words with you. Lord Yu and I will delay the 2 princes. You go all out and kill the rest." Yu Ruifeng didn't answer and only nodded. At this time, Prince Gus took a step forward. His body was filled with boundless spirit and mental strength. He said, "Sang He-tong, you have to think clearly. Even if you have the advantage in strength, if you want to kill us, be careful not to give up your life here." Prince Gus's words were very intimidating. He was a spirit caster at unity with the world realm. If he really fought with his life on the line, it was possible that he could take everyone down with him. Sang He Tong's eyes flashed with cold light. He seemed to have a trace of hesitation. Great Elder Year of the Gu God sect hurriedly shouted, "Sect leader! You can't hesitate anymore. They're stalling for time. Don't forget they still have the Imperial Guards." Sang He Tong was shocked. That's right, since the two princes were here, the Imperial Guards had no reason not to come. It was just that everyone here was an expert. They were very fast, so they came early. Behind them, there were thousands of Imperial Guards rushing here. The Imperial Guards were not ordinary soldiers. The weakest in the Imperial Guards were Spirit Transformation Realm cultivators. There were also experts at the Sky Realm. They could be said to be the strongest fighting force in Zhulu country. This was also the reason why Sang He Tong wanted to lure the two princes out. No matter how strong he was, he would be killed by the Imperial Guards. There's no time to lose. Quickly make your move. Sang He Tong ordered and took the lead. A pair of wings made of goo worms appeared behind him and he flew into the sky. He crossed his hands and shook them. Countless green threads appeared behind him and weaved into a spider web. Dozens of huge goo worms appeared beside you. Every goo worm's aura was comparable to the spirit aperture realm. These goo worms bared their fangs and charged towards the pro-war faction's crowd, causing them to be in a state of confusion. Prince Heli shouted. His fist broke through the void and charged towards Yura with a wave of fire. Prince Gus quickly formed a series of hand seals while chanting an incantation. Suddenly, a blue magic formation with a radius of 300 meters appeared in the night sky, facing off against Sang He Tong's spiderweb. Sang He Tong smiled, "Lord Yu, it's up to you." A broadsword appeared in Yu Ruifeng's hand. He held the broadsword horizontally and a shocking sword intent was emitted from his body. It was as if the entire world was enveloped by sword intent. Yu Ruifeng's sword turned and a gray sword light that was dozens of meters long slashed towards Yu. Chapter 375. Yale had released a dozen goo worms that were comparable to rank 4 fiend beasts, so he had to divert part of his attention to control them. Since Prince Heli was coming for him, he focused all of his attention on Prince Heli. How could he have expected Yu Ruifeng, who was on their side, to suddenly attack him? Yu Ruifeng's terrifying sword slashed with destructive killing intent. Yale's reaction was slow, and he only had time to summon a few goo worms to block the attack. However, Yu Ruifeng's sword slashed through all of the goo worms in an instant. Yale formed a seal with his hands and a dense blood energy burst out, condensing into a goo worm that looked like blood jade behind him. The goo worm took the initiative to meet Yu Ruifeng's sword slash. With a loud clang, a deep sword mark appeared on the goo worm's body, and it opened its mouth to let out a soundless wail. However, it was fortunate that he managed to block this sudden sword strike. Yu Ruifeng's move caused everyone's expression to change. Bess, Prince Gus and Prince Heli's gloomy faces were replaced with smiles of success. In contrast, Sang He Tong's smug expression instantly darkened. Only one person knew Yu Ruifeng would attack the Gu God sect, and that was Leng Shiqi. Leng Shiqi, who had been hiding in the depths of the earth, saw everything with his eyes open. He had to admit this was a good show. Princess Carol had used him to lure out the experts from the Gu God Peak. Prince Heli wanted to eliminate them and destroy the Gu God Peak, cutting off Sang He Tong's escape route. However, Sang He Tong had already known all of this and lured Prince Heli out, wanting to eliminate them quickly. However, Prince Gus was also hiding in the dark. Not only that, but he had also roped in Bess. In truth, Leng Shiqi could see that Prince Gus didn't want to come out so early. He was probably still waiting for the Imperial Guards to arrive. Unfortunately, he didn't expect Sang He Tong to come so quickly. The most important thing was the Dark Lightning Guards. When Yu Ruifeng and the others appeared beside Sang He, Leng Shiqi guessed that Yu Ruifeng would betray them. Yu Ruifeng hated the peacemaking sect and the Gu God sect to the core, so how could he stand on the side of the Gu God sect? Although Leng Shiqi had guessed this result, he still couldn't help but praise Yu Ruifeng. Yu Ruifeng was indeed a veteran Dark Thunder Guard inspector. He was able to put himself in the most crucial position in a situation where 3 forces were divided. It could be said that he held great initiative. Even if Yu Ruifeng wanted to help anyone, it would only take a single thought from him. Leng Shiqi could only describe Yu Ruifeng as an old silver coin. At the same time, he was also very curious as to how many complicated things had happened in the day he left Royal City to cause such a scene. In the battle, Yu Ruifeng's sudden betrayal once again turned the tide of the battle. Although Yale barely managed to block Yu Ruifeng's strike, Prince Heli was already on the attack. Prince Heli had already turned into a fire dragon. He roared angrily, and an earth-shattering dragon roar resounded through the sky. Even the water prison set by Prince Gus trembled. Yale exclaimed, "Red Sky Dragon Transformation Technique." Yale spat out a mouthful of hot blood at the critical moment. Before the blood fell to the ground, several monsters that looked like humans and insects appeared in front of him. These monsters opened their mouths and swallowed Yale's blood. Suddenly, the blood on their bodies surged, and each monster's chi was comparable to a spirit cultivator of the spirit astral realm. Yale controlled these monsters to charge at the fire dragon. He also knew that it was impossible to stop Prince Heli with this method, so his goal was to escape. Then, a human figure formed by goo worms separated from Yale's body and drilled into the ground, running towards the edge of the water prison. Yu Ruifeng's eyes flashed coldly. He swung his sword and the blade split the sky. His sword style was very simple. It was just a casual swing of the sword, but it felt like it was going to split the space. The monsters released by Yale were instantly crushed into a pile of mud under the pincer attack of Prince Heli and Yu Ruifeng, and completely swallowed Yale. However, after the sword light and fire dragon dissipated, Yale's figure was nowhere to be seen. Prince Heli was startled. Not good, he escaped. At the same time, a series of loud noises resounded from the sky. They raised their heads and saw that Sang and Tong were already fighting with Prince Gus. The green net behind Sang and Tong was shooting out countless rays of light, covering the sky and earth. Prince Gus's huge blue formation also spewed out streams of water. The streams of water looked soft and powerless, but they were comparable to the green light. Sang and Tong's face was like an iron pot. His cultivation was higher than Prince Gus's, but he couldn't gain the upper hand at all in this fight. To deal with a spirit caster, large-scale attacks like this were disadvantageous to begin with, because that was what spirit casters were best at. In fact, Sang and Tong's initial opponent wasn't Prince Gus's, but Yu Ruifeng's sudden betrayal left him with no choice. Especially when Sang and Tong looked down and saw that Yale had already been beaten back by Prince Heli and Yu Ruifeng. His heart sank to the bottom of the valley. If 3 Unity of Heaven realm experts attacked him together, even if he used all his trump cards, it was very likely that he would die here. Retreat. Retreat to Goo God Peak. Sang and Tong knew that he had lost tonight's battle. The key to his defeat was Yu Ruifeng's betrayal. Thus Sang and Tong said fiercely, "Very good, Lord Yu really is a good schemer. We'll settle this score later." Prince Gus said, "Sang and Tong, do you still think you can escape?" Sang and Tong looked at the water prison around them. His face flashed with ruthlessness. Goo God sect disciples, form the myriad goo devouring formation. Yes. All the members of the Goo God sect answered at the same time. Then they released all their goo worms. In an instant, goo worms filled the sky, almost filling up the entire water prison. With Sang and Tong as the center, the goo worms kept circling around, gradually forming the pattern of a formation. Prince Gus immediately shouted, "Stop them." Too late. Sang and Tong laughed nastily. Myriad goo devouring formation break. Countless goo worms arranged themselves in a strange rhythm. Soon after, waves of green light filled everyone's vision. Puffing noises could be heard as the water prison set up by Prince Gus was completely devoured by the goo worms. Chapter 376. The disciples of the Goo God sect broke the water prison with the goo swallowing array and left all the goo worms here to stop the main war faction. Under the leadership of Sang, Tong and Yu, those disciples quickly fled back to the Goo God Peak. Prince Heli roared, "We can't let them go back to the Goo God Peak." There was a protective array in the Goo God Peak. As long as Sang and Tong entered the Goo God Peak and opened the protective array, they would be invincible. The traps set by the main war faction would be in vain. Gus, Heli, and Yu Ruifeng all made a big move, tearing a big hole in countless goo worms, and rushed out, chasing after the disciples of the Goo God sect. Several masters of the Gang Spirit realm followed closely. As for the rest of the people of the Spirit Aperture realm and the Spirit Pulse realm, they were temporarily trapped here. Fortunately, the people in front of them had cleared most of the goo worms, and these goo worms were not much of a threat without the control of the spirit cultivators, so they were not in danger. Just as these dozens of people were clearing out the goo worms, a figure sneaked in unknowingly. He came to the surroundings of the Dark Thunder Guards and found one of them. Old Guan. Guan Feihong was shocked when he heard this. He turned around and saw Leng Shiqi coming to his side. My lord, why are you here? It's a long story. By the way, tell me what happened in the past day? Leng Shiqi asked. Guan Feihong killed the goo worms around him and said, My lord, in fact, I don't know much. I only know that after Lord Yu entered the palace, he quickly found out that the king's death was related to the goo poison. It was a rather peculiar goo poison. They were planted on the king and the queen respectively. Usually, if they were separated, the goo poison was not a poison, but beneficial to the human body. But once the king and the princess were together, the combination of the two became a magical slow-acting goo poison. The king has been eroded by this slow-acting goo poison for a long time and may die at any time. Leng Shiqi waved his black jade sword and cut down the goo worms one after another. He understood. According to Sang Hetong, the reason why the Dark Lightning Guards were able to find out so quickly was because Sang Hetong had secretly told Yu Ruifeng about it. He wanted Yu Ruifeng to put the blame on Princess Consort. Not only that, since the king had been poisoned, then the Princess Consort must be the same, just slightly less so than the king. When Princess Carol learned of this, she was so anxious that she wanted to sneak into the Goo God Peak to steal the antidote. And she became a chess piece in the hands of Wang Fei and the pro-war faction. They simply let her use the excuse of stealing the antidote to lure out the master of Gushin Peak. Once the Goo God Peak did not have a spirit cultivator of the four realms of heaven, they would not have the capital to activate the sect protecting Great Array. And so, everything that happened tonight was the result of that. The only difference was that Princess Carol met Leng Shiqi on the way. She used the mind control voodoo as a lure and let Leng Shiqi take her place to lure out the experts of the Goo God Peak. However, Leng Shiqi still had a doubt. That was, how did Wang Fei and the pro-war faction know that Sang Hetong would suddenly come here from King City? Leng Shiqi, who was hiding underground, had his supercilious eyes open. He saw very clearly that Sang Hetong's group had directly teleported here through some kind of teleportation array. If Bess Wang Fei and the two princes had expected Sang Hetong to come, then it would be fine. However, logically speaking, they should be blocking Sang and Tong's path from the rear, and not hiding from the start. They clearly knew that Sang Hetong would come through the teleportation array. However, this could be said to be Sang Hetong's most important trump card. It was also his most important method to get rid of Prince Heli. How could he easily leak it? At this time, another Dark Lightning Guard also noticed Leng Shiqi. He said, Hey Lord Lu, you're here too. This time we were able to deal a heavy blow to the Goo God sect thanks to Brother Guan. Hearing this, Leng Shiqi's heart couldn't help but tighten. He suddenly had a bad premonition. Leng Shiqi didn't ask Guan Feihong this time. Instead, he asked the other Dark Lightning Guard, What did Guan Feihong do? That person paused for a moment, then said, It was Brother Guan who received news from Sang Hetong that they have a teleportation array that can instantly cross dozens of miles. That's why we set up this trap. Oh Guan, did you really do this? Leng Shiqi hurriedly asked Guan Feihong. Guan Feihong nodded. Yes. Then how did you learn of this? I was poisoned with mind-controlling voodoo. Lord, you told me not to show it. Later, Sang Hetong passed this information to me through mind-controlling voodoo. He told me to secretly add fuel to the fire and force the pro-war faction to leave the city. This subordinate felt that this matter was of great importance. Lord wasn't in the city at the time, so this subordinate reported it to Lord Yu. Leng Shiqi felt that something was wrong. Although he had helped Guan Feihong break free from mind-controlling voodoo twice, he didn't have the ability to remove it. Otherwise, he wouldn't have asked Tu Dang for the method to remove it. But from Guan Feihong's words, it seemed that he had already removed the mind-controlling voodoo. Leng Shiqi thought, that's not right. If he wasn't controlled by mind-controlling voodoo, how did Sang Hetong give him the order? Moreover, Guan Feihong is only a Dark Lightning envoy. His words carry little weight. How can he influence the pro-war faction's decision? Why would Sang Hetong give him such an order? Unless... Suddenly Leng Shiqi shivered. He looked straight at Guan Feihong and asked word by word, Did you remove the mind-controlling voodoo? Guan Feihong showed a strange expression. Lord, why do you ask this? Didn't you just help this subordinate remove the mind-controlling voodoo? When he said this, Leng Shiqi's heart sank. At the same time, he felt a chill run down his spine. There was only one thought in his mind right now, and that was, everyone has underestimated Sang and Tong. Where did he get the ability to remove the mind-controlling voodoo a day ago? However, Guan Feihong spoke with certainty. This was clearly an order that Sang Hetong secretly gave Guan Feihong. That was to make Guan Feihong believe that he had removed the mind-controlling voodoo. Leng Shiqi's mind was spinning. I'm afraid that when I temporarily freed Guan Feihong from the mind-controlling voodoo in front of everyone, Sang Hetong discovered it. However, I don't know if there was a traitor or if Sang Hetong sensed the abnormality of the mind-controlling voodoo. Therefore, Sang Hetong used Guan Feihong to deliberately let them know that they could teleport here. I didn't think that mind-controlling voodoo could be used like this. But, what was Sang Hetong's goal in doing this? Could it be that he deliberately set up a trap to send himself to his death? Leng Shiqi was puzzled. Chapter 377. Leng Shiqi knew he couldn't let his imagination run wild. He had to get rid of Guan Feihong's mind control goo first. He said to Guan Feihong, "Old Guan, don't move. I'll take out the mind control goo for you." Guan Feihong was confused at first, but when he saw Leng Shiqi's serious expression, he was shocked. "My lord, could it be that I?" Leng Shiqi gestured for him to keep quiet. Then he made a small cut on Guan Feihong's chest and muttered something. Then a small thing slowly came out of Guan Feihong's heart. Guan Feihong's face was filled with pain, but he didn't make a sound. About 10 breaths later, the little bug was finally lured out by Leng Shiqi. After it came out, it fell to the ground and stopped breathing. Once the mind control goo leaves the body, it will die instantly. Seeing the mind control goo die, Leng Shiqi finally let out a sigh of relief. Guan Feihong was shocked. He had already guessed that he was being used. Guan Feihong ignored the wounds on his body and whispered, "My lord, Sang Hetong is scheming. What is he trying to do?" Leng Shiqi shook his head. He couldn't think of any reason. All of this seemed like Sang Hetong wanted to commit suicide. It was unbelievable. Even Leng Shiqi started to doubt his own judgment. At this moment, orderly footsteps could be heard from afar. The goo worms here were almost all cleared out. Everyone turned their heads and saw groups of Imperial guards entering their sight. At a rough glance, there were thousands of people. Leng Shiqi was speechless. He was afraid that 90% of the Imperial guards had been mobilized. If that was the case, wouldn't Monarch City be empty? He frowned. Is Sang Hetong's target Imperial City? Several people walked out of the crowd and shouted, "The two princes have already gone to kill Sang Hetong. We will immediately go to Gushin Peak. Today we will remove the Gushin sect from Zhulu." Then, the dozens of people present led thousands of Imperial guards to the Gu God Peak. Leng Shiqi pondered for a moment and followed. This place was not far from the Gu God Peak, only about a dozen miles away. Along the way they saw some scattered corpses of the Gu God sect disciples. But when they were about to reach the Gu God Peak, the entire Gu God Peak burst out with a green light that illuminated the entire night sky. Then the green light began to shrink again until it reached the middle of the mountain. The Gu God sect's sect protecting array was activated. In the end, Sang and Tong fled back to Gushin Peak. Leng Shiqi thought this is going to be tricky. Not only did Sang and Tong activate the sect protecting Grand Formation, they even gave up the lower half of the Gu God Peak. They are going to defend it to the death. Let's see if Prince Gus has any tricks up his sleeve. Leng Shiqi and the others walked all the way to the mountainside. During this time, they did not see a single disciple of the Gu God sect. It seemed that all the disciples of the Gu God sect had retreated to the top. Prince Gus and the others who had arrived at the beginning were standing in front of the sect protecting Grand Formation, discussing something. I didn't expect Sang and Tong to be so difficult to deal with. Your Highness, do you have any understanding of this formation? Yuruafeng asked. Prince Gus said, "This formation was created by the previous Gu God sect leader, Tu Dang. In the history of the Gu God sect, it has only been activated once. That was a few decades ago. It is said that at that time, several spirit cultivator sects joined forces to destroy the Gu God sect. In the end, they all died on the Gu God Peak. It was also because of that battle that the Gu God sect established their position." Prince Heli continued, "But some time ago, we captured an old disciple of the Gu God sect and got some information about this formation from him. This formation is called the Gu Poison Calamity Formation. The area covered by the formation is filled with Gu poison. Not only that, the formation will block all perception, making it easy to get lost. Once the people of the Gu God sect sneak attack, the consequences would be unimaginable. Can be said that this is a trap and kill formation." Yuruafeng saw that their words were clear and logical, and knew that they must have a way to break the formation. Thus he asked, "Your Highness, do you have a way to break the formation?" Prince Heli laughed strangely. "The Gu God sect has always been famous for using Gu. But you don't know that us two brothers have studied Gu worms. Lord, you please take a look." Prince Heli raised his hand and released a thumb-sized black goo worm. This goo worm is specially cultivated by us. It can block the goo poison. As long as each of us has one, we won't be afraid of the goo poison in the formation. Prince Gus took out a bracelet and said, "The people who wear this will sense each other's location. With this we won't have to worry about getting lost. Has already been heavily injured by us. We don't have to fear him. Let's force our way in and kill Sang and Tong. Everything will be settled." So the two of them were already prepared. Yu Ruifeng laughed heartily and cupped his hands. "Your Highness, you are really well prepared. As the saying goes, know thyself and know thy enemy, and you will never be defeated. This one admires you." Prince Heli turned around and saw that Leng Shichi and the thousands of guards had arrived. He and Prince Gus distributed the goo worms and bracelets to everyone. After knowing that these two items were used, Leng Shichi was secretly shocked. To be able to cultivate these strange goo worms and make thousands of bracelets that could sense each other, it took a lot of resources. Obviously, these two had been planning to get rid of the Goo God sect for a long time. After everyone received the items, they broke into the Goo God sect's sect protection formation. Leng Shichi stayed for a few breaths of time. Then he took out a fingernail-sized jade bead and crushed it. Then he followed everyone into the sect protection formation. On the other side of the Goo God Peak, Tu Dang, who was immersed in the scripture world, suddenly woke up. His eyes narrowed as he murmured, Little friend Lu is in danger so soon?" Leng Shichi used the scripture to make a deal with Tu Dang not long ago to ask Tu Dang to save him once. Now that they broke into the sect protection formation, Leng Shichi didn't know what Sang and Tong wanted to do, so it was better to be safe. Tu Dang withdrew the golden light around him. He immediately saw the sect protection formation on the Goo God Peak. His face couldn't help but become dignified. Sang and Tong actually opened the sect protection formation. The Goo God sect has already reached this point. However, Tu Dang's eyes suddenly widened. No, no, no. This sect protection formation is strange. This is clearly the blood sacrifice formation. Sang and Tong actually deduced the blood sacrifice formation from the words I left behind. Not good. Immediately, Tu Dang turned into a golden stream of light and went straight to the Goo God Peak. Chapter 378. With proper preparations, the two princes and Yu Ruifeng led everyone into the Goo God sect's sect-protecting array. As soon as he stepped into the array, Leng Shichi saw that everything around him was green. It was filled with green smoke, but in reality, it was all goo poison. Once inhaled, the consequences would be unimaginable. At this time, the goo worm on his shoulder opened its mouth and spat out a faint black fog that enveloped him, isolating the green poisonous gas outside. The effect is not bad. With the black smoke blocking him, Leng Shichi quietly opened his Byakugan. Then he was stunned. Originally, he expected that there would be many Goo God sect disciples hiding nearby, ready to ambush them at any time. But there was not a single Goo God sect disciple's aura. Instead, at the peak, there were over 1,000 spirit cultivators' auras. It turned out that all the Goo God sect disciples ran to the peak. Leng Shichi felt that it was strange they actually gave up such an advantageous terrain and ran to the peak. It was really strange. Leng Shichi couldn't help but think, could it be that Sang and Tong already guessed that Prince Gus was prepared, so they decided to gather all their forces and fight to the death? Walking and walking, everyone was about to reach the peak. The others gradually sensed something. There were a few whispers in the group. It's so quiet. Something is wrong. Could it be a trap? Hearing this, Prince Heli said loudly, What's wrong? Sang and Tong knew we were prepared, so they gathered all their forces at the peak to put up a desperate struggle. Something is wrong. Prince Gus frowned. If Sang and Tong knew that we were prepared, they should have retreated. Now that all the exits of the Goo God Peak are blocked by us, it means that they did not escape. With Sang and Tong's temperament, it is possible that they are planning to die together. Prince Heli analyzed. That makes sense. Prince Gus said, We still have to be careful. Thus, everyone was even more vigilant as they walked to the peak. At the peak, there were 3 palaces in a triangle. In the middle was a huge jade plaza. Thousands of disciples of the Goo God sect were standing solemnly in the middle of the square, waiting for the arrival of the enemy. However, Sect Master Sang and Tong were not here. Only Yer and several Gang Spirit Realm elders were standing at the front. Not long after, the 2 princes and Yu Ruifeng arrived with their men. Even though thousands of people had entered the square, it was not crowded at all. Prince Heli didn't care about the seriously injured Yer and the Gang Spirit Realm cultivators at all. He roared, Where is Sang and Tong? Come out and die. Ha! Suddenly, a burst of wild laughter rang out. Judging from the voice, it was Sang He Tong. However, his voice came from all directions, making it impossible to determine his location. Prince Gus suddenly closed his eyes as if he was trying to sense something. But he quickly opened his eyes and whispered, "My senses are greatly limited in this poison array. I can't sense where he is." "Are you looking for me?" Sang He Tong's voice resounded once more. At the same time, his figure appeared once more. But the strange thing was that there were actually 3 Sang He Tongs. The 3 Sang He Tongs stood at the top of the 3 palaces, looking at the crowd with contemptuous smiles. It was as if a god who was high above the 9 heavens was looking down at the ant-like beings. Prince Heli immediately snorted, "Humph," pretending to be mysterious. "This is my home ground. If you want to kill me, let's see if you have the ability to do so." Sang He Tong sneered. Prince Gus, Prince Heli, and Yu Ruifeng quietly exchanged glances. Then the 3 of them suddenly rushed to the 3 Sang He Tongs. The 3 Sang He Tongs smiled strangely and suddenly disappeared. Yu Ruifeng and the other 2 Oneness of Heaven and Man Realm Masters all rushed into the 3 palaces. They all thought that Sang He Tong was deliberately mystifying. Now that the first elder of the Gu God sect was seriously injured, Sang He Tong was the only one who could fight. Therefore, no matter what Sang He Tong's plan was, they could break it with force. Because they were far more powerful than the Gu God sect in terms of high-end combat power and number of people. Rumble! The 3 Oneness of Heaven and Man Realm cultivators attacked with astonishing might. In the blink of an eye, more than half of the 3 palaces were destroyed. At the same time, the thousands of Imperial Guards also rushed to kill the Gu God sect disciples. A huge battle between over 10,000 spirit cultivators had begun. Red instantly became the main color of the mountain peak. Lung Shichi was swimming in the crowd. He found a disciple of the Gu God sect who was at the Spirit Pulse realm and started to fight. With his current strength he could kill the disciple in 1 or 2 moves, but he did not do so. Because their advantage was too big, so big that it did not matter if he was there or not. Another more important reason was that Lung Shichi had always felt that something was not quite right. Sang He Tong gathered all the Gu God sect disciples at the peak, giving off a feeling of fighting to the death. But if it was Lung Shichi, he would take advantage of the sect protecting array and bring the disciples to forcefully break out of the encirclement. As the saying goes, where there is life there is hope. As long as they escape, they can at least save the lives of many disciples. Now that Sang He Tong had done this, if nothing unexpected happened, the disciples of the Gu God sect would be completely annihilated. What was the point of doing this? Unless Sang He Tong had a way to turn the tide. Lung Shichi carefully observed his surroundings as he paddled. He wanted to see what Sang He Tong was doing. Very quickly, Lung Shichi found something strange and familiar. With so many spirit cultivators on both sides fighting, blood quickly flowed into a river. However, the blood was seeping into the jade stone plaza below at a speed visible to the naked eye. However, everyone's attention was focused on the battle, so they did not notice it for a moment. Lung Shichi felt a chill down his spine. Because he had seen this scene before in the Phantom Spirit's Secret. He remembered that on the stone platform, those vengeful spirits used this method to absorb spirit cultivators' blood and soul power to strengthen themselves. Later on, he found out that there was a blood-refining array under their feet. It was a terrifying array that Meng Tianzong used to sacrifice tens of thousands of disciples to break through. And now, on the Gu God Peak, a similar scene appeared, which made Lung Shichi even more uneasy. A crazy idea appeared in his mind: there's also a blood sacrifice array here. Chapter 379. While Lung Shichi was secretly guessing, Yu Ruifeng's side also changed. After the 3 of them destroyed the palace, they didn't find Sang He Tong's figure. It turned out that the 3 Sang He Tongs were just illusions. Just as they were about to attack again, the 3 palaces suddenly shot out blood-red light into the sky. The blood-red light suddenly formed 3 cages, trapping Yu Ruifeng and the other 2 inside. What was even more mysterious was that the 3 Unity of Heaven realm experts couldn't do anything to the blood-red cage. At this time they all realized that something was wrong. The Imperial Guards also noticed this change, but Prince Heli shouted, "Don't worry about us, kill all the disciples of the Gu God sect first." Although the blood-red light temporarily trapped them, it didn't pose any threat to them. As long as they continued to attack, they would soon be able to escape. The Imperial Guards killed even more vigorously. However, they didn't care. In some places, after the jade under their feet was broken, blood-red gullies were revealed. Leng Shiqi saw it. He thought of the series of strange actions of Sang He Tong, and a terrifying thought appeared in his mind. Sang He Tong is very likely to be like Meng Tianzong, wanting to kill a lot of spirit cultivators to break through to the Sky Origin realm. The battle outside the Gu God Peak was all part of Sang He Tong's plan. He deliberately leaked the final information to the Dark Thunder Guards through Guan Fei Hong to create the illusion that he was defeated, so that many experts and Imperial Guards would be attracted to the Gu God Peak. Of course, all of this was just Leng Shiqi's guess. If all of this was true, Sang He Tong was too terrifying. Leng Shiqi didn't care about the truth. He already had the intention to retreat. If his guess was right, then this place was clearly a dead place. If he guessed wrong, the destruction of the Gu God sect was only a matter of time. The result would be the same whether he was here or not. So he pulled Guan Fei Hong and said, "Old Guan, quickly follow me." When Guan Fei heard this, he didn't hesitate and wanted to leave with Leng Shiqi. Unfortunately, they were still one step too late. Now almost all the disciples of the Gu God sect had been killed, and only a few elders of the Gang Spirit realm were still struggling. However, they were all covered in blood. Obviously, they couldn't hold on for long. However, at this time, the whole Jade Square suddenly began to tremble. Every time it trembled, it became more and more violent, and the blood gullies under the jade slabs were exposed. Everyone exclaimed when they saw this scene, but their exclamations immediately turned into horror. With a flash of blood-red light, an extremely powerful suction force suddenly came from under everyone's feet, making them unable to move. "I can't move, what's going on? My blood is flowing out. Me too. Help me. Help me." No. Soon, several people's, the suction and the suction force became stronger. Everyone present, including the thousands of Imperial Guards, the experts of the 4 realms of heaven, the remaining people of the Gu God sect, and even Yu Ruifeng and the other 2 were all the same. No one was an exception. The great elder of the Gu God sect, Yer, also exclaimed, "Sect leader, what are you doing?" Prince Heli also felt that there was a strange power in the blood light that trapped them, and it was sucking their qi and blood. "Sang He Tong, what are you playing at?" "Ha ha ha." Sang He Tong laughed again. This time he laughed more freely and crazily than last time. Sang He Tong finally appeared. He drilled out from the ground in the center of the square. His qi was much stronger than before, and he had reached the peak of the unity of heaven and man realm. His hands formed a seal, and as soon as the seal moved, all the spirit cultivators within 100 feet of him exploded. A large amount of qi and blood didn't scatter, but all poured into Sang He Tong's body, and his qi also increased a little. Yu Ruifeng and the other 2's faces darkened. They were experienced and knowledgeable, so they immediately knew what Sang He Tong was doing. He actually wanted to blood refine the spirit cultivators here to increase his cultivation. Sang He Tong was originally at the late stage of the unity of heaven and man realm. Just now, over 1,000 spirit cultivators had died in the battle, and he had silently absorbed their qi and blood. Now he was at the peak of the unity of heaven and man realm. In terms of cultivation alone, he was the strongest existence among the people present. But Sang He Tong was clearly not satisfied with this. He laughed sinisterly, "Your Highnesses and Master Yu of the Dark Thunder Guards, you guys have schemed to get rid of me to destroy the Gu God sect. Now that the disciples of the Gu God sect are all dead, are you satisfied?" "Lunatic, you lunatic!" Prince Heli roared. "Lunatic? You're right, I am a lunatic. So what if all the disciples of the Gu God sect are dead? As long as I break through to the Sky Origin realm, a mere Gu God sect can be rebuilt at any time." Prince Gus suddenly said, "So your goal has always been to use such a vicious method to break through to the Sky Origin realm, and not to obtain the throne?" Sang He Tong laughed disdainfully. "Throne? Humph, that kind of laughable thing is only pursued by people like you. Only power is the most beautiful thing in this world." At this point, Sang He Tong's face showed an infatuated expression. "As for the throne? After all of you become the energy for me to break through to the Sky Origin realm, I will support Chu Li to the throne, and let him continue to provoke the Thunderfire dynasty. Also, Master Yu of the Dark Thunder Guards died in Zhulu country. I believe that the Thunderfire dynasty will attack Zhulu country soon. At that time, there will be countless fresh blood for me to cultivate, and I might even reach a higher realm." When these words came out, no matter which side it was, they were all shocked. No one would have thought that Sang He Tong had such a grand plan. Leng Shiqi finally connected all the dots. It turned out that Sang He Tong had secretly sent Jill and the others to the West Desolate Province to collect iron, and he had already started his plan. He treated everyone, even the entire Zhulu country, as a chess piece. Such a person was simply terrifying. At the same time, far away in King City, dawn had already broken. Elder Chu Li did not sleep for the entire night. He stood in the courtyard looking at the Gu God Peak. The result of the battle at the Gu God Peak directly determined his fate. He muttered, "I hope Sang He Tong succeeds." However, at this moment Chu Li's eyes suddenly became hollow, and in a breath's time they returned to normal. He then walked out of the courtyard and said to the servant, "Prepare a sedan, we're going to the palace." "Yes, master." Chu Li smiled, "It's time to prepare for the ascension." Chapter 380. Although Leng Shiqi was shocked by Sang Hetong's schemes and methods, he was also thinking hard about how to escape. He could clearly feel the qi and blood in his body gradually disappearing, but he could not move at all. The Hand of Earth had also lost its effect. He tried to switch between different techniques, but in the end he could only move his body slightly when he used the extreme gold mysterious yang art. Leng Shiqi's heart skipped a beat. The gold attribute technique could indeed restrain this strange formation. His hands moved as if he was holding a flower, and a faint layer of Buddhist light appeared on his body. At the same time, a cloak made of silver holy energy appeared on his back. With the support of the gold attribute technique, the Buddhist light, and the holy energy, Leng Shiqi could finally take a step forward. Unfortunately, his walking speed was like that of an old man. Not only was it slow, it was also a little shaky. "All right." Sang Hetong's tone suddenly changed, "It's time to send you on your way." With that, he formed a series of hand seals. With him as the center, all the spirit cultivators within a radius of 300 meters exploded and died. Only spirit cultivators at the four realms of heaven could resist for a while, but they could not avoid such an outcome. In an instant 2,000 to 3,000 people died. A dense blood aura soared into the sky. The blood of the spirit cultivators condensed into a river of blood that flowed into Sang Hetong's body. Sang Hetong's cultivation aura immediately soared, reaching the limit of unity of heaven and man. He was only one step away from breaking through to the sky origin realm and becoming the strongest in the world. "Ha!" Prince Heli roared. His body instantly transformed into a blazing dragon, wanting to break through the blood prison that trapped him. Unfortunately, the blood prison did not know what method it used. Under the full power attack of a late-stage unity of heaven and man expert, it kept trembling and twisting but did not collapse. Prince Heli's expression finally changed. His actions attracted Sang Hetong's attention. He said sternly, "I originally wanted to leave you last, but since you want to die, I'll send you on your way first." Sang Hetong changed his hand seal, and hundreds of blood-red tentacles suddenly appeared behind him and connected to Prince Heli's blood prison. After that, the tentacles started to rapidly absorb Prince Heli's blood essence and transfer it all to Sang Hetong. Of course, Prince Heli couldn't just sit there and wait for his death. However, the more fiercely he fought back, the faster his qi and blood disappeared. Even his spiritual power was being transferred to Sang Hetong. Sang Hetong smiled and said, "It's useless. This sect master has spent dozens of years and countless resources to create this blood prison. Unless it's a heavenly origin stage expert, it's impossible to break this blood prison." "Heli, oh Heli, you've always pretended to be reckless, but now you're really being reckless. The more powerful the spiritual technique you use, the more intense your blood and qi will be. You actually helped me, haha." Prince Heli immediately stopped. His eyes were bloodshot as if he wanted to skin Sang He and swallow him alive. Prince Gus and Yu Ruifeng's eyes lit up as they tried to think of a way to escape. "What a disgusting gaze. You should just die." Sang Hetong's face twisted. His qi and blood surged as he increased the rate at which he absorbed Prince Heli's blood essence. Prince Heli's burly body began to shrivel, but there was nothing he could do. He could only wait for his death. However, Prince Heli didn't struggle madly, nor did he scream in fear. Instead, he stared at Sang and Tong as though he wanted to imprint Sang and Tong's appearance into his soul. A moment later, the Grand Prince of Zhulu, a late-stage Prince Heli at unity with the world, turned into a dried corpse. Prince Gus roared, "Sang Hetong, if I don't die, I'll let you know what it means to wish you were dead." Sang Hetong smiled contemptuously, "Don't worry. You'll be accompanying him soon." With a wave of his hand, the blood tentacles connected to Prince Heli separated and connected to Prince Gus and Yu Ruifeng. He wanted to absorb their blood essence at the same time. However, he didn't absorb the blood essence of the three unity with the world realms. Instead, they gathered around him and formed streams of blood. His cultivation was already at the limit of unity with the world realm. Thus, he needed to accumulate enough blood essence to break through to Sky Origin realm. Everyone present was filled with despair. They couldn't move at all. Even Prince Heli, who was at unity with the world realm, died so easily. They would die here sooner or later. Leng Shiqi could move now. Sang He Tong's attention was on Prince Gus and Yu Ruifeng, so they didn't notice him. However, his movement speed was too slow. If this continued, he wouldn't be able to escape death either. His fate skill was still on cooldown. Thus, his only hope was Tu Dang. At this moment, a golden light cut through the fog created by the poison cleansing formation. It also cut through the blood essence in the sky and suddenly appeared. The golden light receded, revealing a person with ragged clothes and disheveled hair. It was Tu Dang. Seeing such a strange person suddenly appear, everyone was a little astonished. However, seeing how easily he barged in and didn't seem to be restrained by the formation, a strong sense of hope rose in their hearts. Leng Shiqi saw Tu Dang appear and his heart relaxed slightly. He didn't care about what would happen to others. At the very least, his own life was a little more secure. After all, he used the scripture to make a deal with Tu Dang not long ago to save him once. The moment Sang and Tong saw Tu Dang, their eyes widened in disbelief. Old fart, you actually managed to break free. How is this possible? Tu Dang said indifferently, nothing is impossible. You were able to comprehend the blood refinement formation from the ancient remnant scroll. You made the impossible possible. Sang He Tong put away his shocked expression and frowned deeply. What happened to your body? Why do you give me such a strange feeling? Tu Dang chuckled. This old man recently heard a saying, lay down the butcher's knife and become a Buddha. Sang He Tong, lay down the butcher's knife. It's not too late. What bullshit is this? Sang He Tong cursed. Since you're here, help me break through to the Sky Origin realm. Tu Dang shook his head and didn't say anything else. Instead, he secretly transmitted to Leng Shiqi, little friend Lu, whether you can stop Sang He Tong or not, it's up to you. Leng Shiqi was stunned. Rely on him? What ability did he have to stop Sang He Tong? Tu Dang's voice continued to transmit. Leng Shiqi's expression changed several times before he finally nodded heavily. Chapter 381. Sang He Tong's hands formed hand seals and used all of his strength. The blood of all the cultivators in the plaza started to circulate crazily, and they were about to explode and die. Tu Dang also formed hand seals, and upon closer inspection, they were actually similar to Sang He Tong's hand seals. With his hand seals, the surging blood in the bodies of the other cultivators calmed down a lot. Sang He Tong was startled at first, but then he sneered, Master, oh Master, didn't you also cultivate this technique? You also want to use the blood sacrifice array to break through to the Sky Origin realm, right? You actually dare to boast and preach to me? The moment he said that, everyone's gaze landed on Tu Dang. This person was actually Sang He Tong's master. He was also the founder of the Gu God sect, the previous sect leader of the Gu God sect. From what they knew, Tu Dang should have died a few decades ago, but now not only did he appear here, he even became enemies with Sang He Tong. There must be a lot of secrets behind this. However, now was not the time for them to investigate the relationship between the master and disciple. They only hoped that Tu Dang could help them escape. Although Tu Dang helped them temporarily suppress the surging blood, he did not care about Prince Gus and Yu Ruifeng. When Sang He Tong was fighting with Tu Dang, he did not stop absorbing their blood. Currently, the blood around him was increasing in number and density. The blood had already turned from bright red to dark red. Every single blood contained the boundless blood of an expert at the Unity of Heaven realm. Prince Gus and Yu Ruifeng's chi were also slowly decreasing. Old thing, even if you have cultivated the technique, the blood sacrifice array was modified by me. You do not have the authority to control it. Furthermore, your cultivation has already fallen to the initial stage of Unity of Heaven realm. As for me, I am at the limit of Unity of Heaven realm. What are you going to use to stop me? Tu Dang did not seem to make any movements, but a strange light suddenly shot out from his body, instantly connecting to Sang He Tong's body. It was the method he used to control the evil thoughts when Leng Shiqi helped him erase them. Sang He Tong's body immediately froze. Tu Dang then sat down cross-legged, and Sang He Tong was actually forced to imitate his actions. Sang He Tong's face immediately became sinister. He tried to control his body with all his strength, but in the end he still sat down like Tu Dang. Old bastard. So what if you can control my body? As long as my will is still there, I can continue to control a portion of the formation and absorb the blood of those two. What can you do to me? Tu Deng continued to remain silent. Two streaks of golden radiance suddenly shot out from his eyes. However, they didn't shoot towards Sang and Tong, but rather towards Leng Shiqi. As the two golden rays entered his body, Leng Shiqi felt his feet lighten. He could move freely now. Leng Shiqi immediately used the ghostly spring steps and approached Sang He Tong in a few flashes. Sang He Tong laughed disdainfully. "Diske, so your trump card is this brat? What can a spiritual pulse stage ant do?" After Leng Shiqi got close, he ignored Sang He Tong and waved his hand. Golden goo worms crawled out of his body. It was the golden silk goo. Seeing this golden thread goo, Mulberry and Tong Tong's sneering expression instantly froze, and in the blink of an eye, they were horrified. Golden silk goo? You actually have the golden silk goo? Golden silk goo was a wondrous worm that countered myriad spirit-devouring technique. Back then, Sang He Tong had used the golden silk goo to trap Tu Deng, so he naturally knew the power of the golden silk goo. Once the golden silk goo entered his body, it would continuously absorb the spirit energy cultivated by his myriad spirit-devouring technique. Not long after, his cultivation would plummet and he would no longer be able to control this formation. Once the formation was out of his control, all his plans would be for naught. However, he was already restricted by Tu Deng and couldn't even move a finger. How could he resist the golden silk goo? Sang He Tong would never have dreamed that the golden silk goo he used to harm Tu Deng would become his nightmare one day. However, Sang He Tong naturally wouldn't just sit there and wait for death. His eyes moved and a plan formed in his mind. Leng Shiqi was preparing to release hundreds of golden thread goo, but at this moment, the blood flowing around Sang and Tong rushed over in a frenzy. Leng Shiqi was already extremely wary of Sang He Tong. Even though he was a Unity of Heaven realm expert, he was still very terrifying. Thus, he was several meters away from Sang He Tong. However, a portion of his attention was used to control the golden silk goo and he didn't expect Sang He Tong to be able to control Enshi's blood. The blood streams arrived in the blink of an eye. Leng Shiqi used ghostly spring ghost steps and dodged most of them, but he was still hit by several blood streams. However, the strange thing was Leng Shiqi wasn't injured at all. Instead, a terrifying amount of vital energy and spirit energy surged out of his body. Shortly after, Leng Shiqi's spirit vein stage 9 cultivation started to rise at a visible speed. In just a few breaths of time he reached the peak of spirit vein stage. Leng Shiqi was stunned. Sang He Tong was actually increasing his cultivation? Could it be that he had gone mad? However, Leng Shiqi's expression immediately changed because the power in his body was still increasing crazily. He even felt that his meridians were about to explode. He immediately understood that Sang He Tong wasn't crazy and wasn't trying to increase his cultivation. Sang He Tong wanted to use this method to make him explode. Sang He Tong's vital energy and spirit energy were all at the Unity of Heaven realm. It was also the power he was preparing to break through to the Heaven origin stage. How could Leng Shiqi, a spirit vein stage cultivator, withstand such enormous power? Sang He Tong was controlled by Tu Deng, so he couldn't use any offensive methods. Thus, he thought of this method to kill Leng Shiqi. At this moment, Tu Deng's expression became serious. However, he was already at his limit. He didn't have the energy to help Leng Shiqi. Right now, Leng Shiqi could only rely on himself. Leng Shiqi's thoughts raced. He knew that the most important thing to do now was to consume the power in his body. There were two ways to consume power. One was to expel it from the body, and the other was to absorb it. Leng Shiqi immediately took out his Qinglin saber and prepared to use fleeting night blooming Sirius to deplete his energy. However, Sang He Tong's eyes flickered and the blood immediately wrapped around Leng Shiqi, preventing him from attacking. As a result, Leng Shiqi had no choice but to absorb the power. He hurriedly circulated the Heaven Fiend 9 Hell Demonic Beast Sacrificial Blood Record to absorb the vital energy and strengthen his body. At the same time he was preparing to do something crazy. That was to open his spirit vein. Currently, Leng Shiqi still had a few spirit veins in his body that hadn't been opened. Opening spirit veins required a large amount of spirit energy. He wanted to use this opportunity to forcefully open the remaining spirit veins. Although opening spirit veins required meticulous care, he had no other choice at this time. Chapter 382. Leng Shiqi was multitasking. While using this power to temper his body, he was also using the spirit energy to open up his spirit veins. However, even if he did not deliberately absorb the spirit energy, his cultivation was still rapidly increasing. He had already reached the limit of the spirit vein realm and could not continue to increase. If this continued, he would explode sooner or later. Leng Shiqi did not dare to hesitate. He held his breath and began to use his spirit energy to open up his spirit veins. Fortunately, he had opened up 50 to 60 spirit veins before. It could be said that his experience in this area was unparalleled. At this moment, even though he was controlling the violent energy, he was still able to open up a spirit vein. Immediately, he felt the pressure in his body lessen and he felt much more comfortable. This method was effective. Leng Shiqi was overjoyed and continued to open up his spirit veins. As time passed, Leng Shiqi opened up one spirit vein after another, consuming a large amount of the terrifying energy in his body. Sang and Tong sensed that something was wrong. According to common sense, Leng Shiqi should have exploded and died. However, after a long time he was still fine. In fact, his body strength had increased greatly. Sang and Tong could see that Leng Shiqi was a little strange. However, this was the only way he could think of to kill Leng Shiqi. He steeled his heart and injected all the blood around him into Leng Shiqi's body. Leng Shiqi finally consumed a portion of his spirit energy. However, at this moment, an even greater amount of energy surged in, causing him to spit out a large mouthful of blood. Now Leng Shiqi had opened up 71 spirit veins. With only one more, he could open up all 72 spirit veins in his body. Leng Shiqi was both sad and happy. He was happy because he had done something that ordinary people could not do or even dare to think about. However, he was sad because once he opened up all the spirit veins, how would he consume the energy in his body? However, I can only take one step at a time. Let's open the last spirit vein first. Thinking of this, Leng Shiqi focused all his attention on opening the 72nd spirit vein. After a short while, Leng Shiqi's body seemed to make a faint sound, and then his whole body suddenly trembled. The 72 spirit veins in his body were always the same, as if they had formed a great cycle that never stopped. At the same time, an invisible force suddenly poured into Leng Shiqi's body. However, this power didn't make him feel uncomfortable. Instead, it helped him open a door in his spirit sea. It was as if a switch had been turned on in his body, and all his power poured into the door. Leng Shiqi's aura rose again, but strangely, his aura was already comparable to the spirit aperture realm, even though he was still in the spirit pulse realm. His current cultivation level was higher than the 9th level of the spirit pulse stage, but he had yet to reach the spirit aperture stage. What realm is this? Even Leng Shiqi was confused, but unfortunately, no one could explain it to him. For the time being, he called this realm Spirit Pulse Stage 10. The good news was that once the door was opened, it was like a black hole, and it didn't reject the tyrannical power produced by the blood flow and swallowed it all. Gradually, the door in Leng Shiqi's spirit sea was almost full. Just when his spirit sea couldn't hold any more spirit energy, something unexpected happened. A pitch-black aura suddenly appeared between Leng Shiqi's eyebrows, and the black aura formed a strange rune on his forehead. Then the rune flashed, and a tyrannical, cold, and unstoppable aura that seemed to come from ancient times suddenly invaded his spirit fantasy world. A sea of memories that didn't belong to him appeared in his mind, and blurry images automatically appeared. Countless strange monsters fought in the sky and on the ground, and the power that swept through the heavens and earth seemed to want to shatter this space. A sea of blood, a mountain of corpses, a throne of bones, a mysterious altar, and a magnificent totem pole standing between heaven and earth. The images finally stopped at a group of ghost-like creatures. They didn't seem to have a physical body, but they could travel between heaven and earth at will. Unknowingly, 3 words suddenly imprinted in Leng Shiqi's mind: Dark Shadow Clan. These strange images appeared suddenly, and disappeared even more suddenly. Before Leng Shiqi could react, they all disappeared. As for the mysterious rune on his forehead, it continued to flash, and began to actively absorb the power in the blood flow. The more power the rune absorbed, the darker it became. In the end, the rune suddenly stopped after absorbing half of the power in the blood flow, and then mysteriously disappeared as if it had never appeared. Everything happened too quickly. Although it took a long time to describe, only 2 or 3 breaths of time had passed since Leng Shiqi opened the 72 spirit veins. However, in this short period of time, Leng Shiqi had absorbed a large amount of blood energy. Sang He-tong's face was filled with shock. Impossible, impossible. Why aren't you dead yet? He roared like a madman and blood veins covered his entire body. A strong wind stirred around him, and his hands that were controlled by Tu Deng actually moved, forming a simple seal. Among the remaining Imperial Guards, more than half of the spirit cultivators instantly exploded into a bloody mist. A large amount of blood energy and spirit energy gathered again, forming a blood ball that wrapped around Leng Shiqi. "Let's see if you die or not." Seeing this, Tu Deng sighed deeply. "Evil disciple, you've already gone mad." Sang He Tong turned a deaf ear to his words. His eyes were bloodshot as he stared at the blood ball that enveloped Leng Shiqi. As for Leng Shiqi, he immediately felt that his spiritual sea was about to burst open, and even his body was riddled with wounds. Leng Shiqi's heart moved and he took out 2 pills from the system space. They were the Spirit Whirlpool Pill and the Awakening Pill. He was preparing to use this opportunity to forcefully break through to the Spirit Aperture Realm. Of course, this method was full of danger, but Leng Shiqi didn't have any other choice. He raised his head and swallowed the 2 pills at the same time. When the Spirit Whirlpool Pill entered his body, it immediately turned into a sticky liquid that flowed into his spirit sea. The sticky liquid adhered to the liquid spirit energy, and the spirit energy began to slowly rotate. The rotation speed became faster and faster, and gradually, it seemed to form a whirlpool. This was the Spirit Whirlpool. It was one of the requirements to break through to the Spirit Aperture Realm from the Spirit Pulse Realm. Leng Shiqi's limitless power from the Spirit Whirlpool Pill and blood instantly completed the evolution. Right now, Leng Shiqi only needed to open one of the 360 spirit apertures in his body to break through to the Spirit Aperture Realm. Then Leng Shiqi would have to make a choice. Right now, among all the cultivation methods he had only the 10,000 Gu Spirit Devouring Technique, Golden Mystic Yang Technique, Cold Underworld Secret Technique, and 5 God Flowing Light Technique recorded the methods to open the spirit apertures. Depending on the characteristics of the cultivation method, the Spirit Aperture Realm would have different choices when breaking through. Leng Shiqi hesitated for a moment, and decided to choose the 5 God Flowing Light Technique. Although the 10,000 Gu Spirit Devouring Technique was a complete 8th level cultivation method, it had a fatal enemy, the Golden Silk Gu. The Golden Mystic Yang Technique was the weakest among the 4 cultivation methods, and the Cold Underworld Secret Technique had too much Yin Qi. Thus, the 5 God Flowing Light Technique was the best choice. Leng Shiqi's heart moved, and the spirit Qi in his body gathered. With the help of the Awakening Pill, he quickly opened a spirit aperture. A star-like light shone on his chin, which meant that he had finally broken through to the Spirit Aperture Realm. Chapter 383. Leng Shiqi's process of breaking through to the Spirit Aperture Realm was exceptionally smooth. Whether it was condensing the spirit spirals or opening the spirit apertures, it was as simple as water flowing through a canal. It was so simple that even Leng Shiqi himself had some doubts. However, after thinking about it, it wasn't impossible. He had already opened 72 spirit veins and had even entered the strange 10th level of the Spirit Aperture Realm. It could be said that his foundation was abnormally deep. This could be considered his own foundation. On the outside he had the Spirit Spirals Pill, the Awakening Pill, and the terrifying power in his blood. With the support of these various powers, it was reasonable for him to easily break through to the Spirit Aperture Realm. Leng Shiqi's aura suddenly changed. Waves of Spirit Aperture Realm aura surged out. The moment he broke through to the Spirit Aperture Realm, his illusion world suddenly shook. Leng Shiqi's heart skipped a beat. He knew that the opportunity he had been waiting for had finally arrived. Nine Leave once said that she had 2 consciousnesses hidden in the depths of the illusion world. He guessed that one of them was Meng Tianzong and the other was the system. These 2 consciousnesses had given him great benefits. Not to mention the system, Meng Tianzong had helped him open 9 spirit veins in an instant, allowing him to quickly increase his cultivation. However, these 2 were also potential threats. Meng Tianzong was an existence even more terrifying than Sang and Tong. Leng Shiqi didn't think that it was a good thing for such a person to hide a consciousness in his illusion world. The system was even more mysterious. It seemed to have followed him through time. Originally, Leng Shiqi thought that the system didn't have its own consciousness, but it was actually hidden in the depths of his soul. This made Leng Shiqi feel uneasy. When a spirit cultivator entered the Spirit Aperture Realm, they would be baptized by the power of heaven and earth. From there, they would be reborn and live longer. When breaking through to the Spirit Aperture Realm, the spirit cultivator's soul would also be baptized. This could be said to be a sublimation of the soul. It was also an opportunity for Leng Shiqi to come into contact with the system's consciousness. Leng Shiqi used 72 spirit veins to break through to the Spirit Aperture Realm. The spirit veins in his body were connected and grew endlessly. After he circulated the 5 God-flowing light art for 1 cycle, he could circulate it on his own and continuously absorb the power of the blood cocoon. As the illusory spirit world shook, he knew that his chance had arrived. Then Leng Shiqi's consciousness sank into the spiritual illusion realm, and his spiritual body immediately underwent a huge change. Originally, his spiritual body was already the size of a 10-year-old child due to continuous cultivation. At this moment, his spiritual body was emitting wisps of white light. His body didn't grow bigger, but his skin, veins, and even every strand of hair on his body became extremely delicate. He was no different from himself. Not only that, but his eyes seemed to be able to see through the heavens and earth, and he immediately saw 2 figures. One of them was an illusory figure that was emitting a faint 7-colored light. His face could not be seen clearly. He was hiding at the edge of the illusory world. That was Meng Tianzong's consciousness. Leng Shiqi's eyes narrowed and became even more profound. He directly saw through the illusion world and saw a figure in the depths of his soul. It was an illusory figure that had the same appearance as Leng Shiqi, but at this moment, the illusory figure was curled up like a fetus and seemed to be sleeping. Leng Shiqi's heart moved, and his spiritual body floated into the depths of his soul. The moment Leng Shiqi appeared here, the system suddenly opened its eyes. There wasn't a trace of emotion in his eyes, as if he was a robot. Leng Shiqi's figure was reflected in his eyes, and there was finally a trace of inhuman coldness in them. The system's body stood up from its curled-up state, and it said in a cold, synthetic voice, "You shouldn't be here." Leng Shiqi was not in the mood to chat with the system. There was still great danger and trouble waiting for him outside, so he had to end this quickly. Leng Shiqi suddenly showed a murderous intent. Seeing this, the system laughed, but its smile was purely a smile. "You want to kill me? Your power comes from me, you can't kill me. Let's give it a try then." Leng Shiqi said as a sword materialized in his hand. The system said, "Do you want to use the 17 sword techniques of Mount Song, or the Shaoyang sword qi? Try it." Saying this, the system's finger moved slightly, and Leng Shiqi suddenly felt like something was missing from his body. He tried to use the Shaoyang sword qi, but he suddenly realized that he did not know the Shaoyang sword qi at all. In Leng Shiqi's memory, the Shaoyang sword qi was clearly cultivated to perfection, but now he could not use it. He tried the 17 sword techniques of Mount Song, and the result was the same. Not only the sword techniques but all the spiritual techniques on his body could not be used. In fact, he couldn't even use most of his cultivation techniques. The system's voice came, "Your techniques and spiritual techniques were all given to you by me. Your power was given to you by me. You want to use the power I gave you to kill me, dream on?" "You're right." Leng Shiqi continued, "My power does indeed come from you, but it's not all of it." Before Leng Shiqi finished speaking, he suddenly threw out a punch and a palm. The fist was like a lion king shaking the forest and sinking the river. It was the Lion King wave-breaking fist. That palm was 6 palms combined into one, and poisonous flames raged. It was the 6-yang poisonous fire palm. Facing this punch and palm, the system's eyes were still calm. It did not use any spiritual techniques and only waved its arm. The power of Leng Shiqi's fist and palm was instantly reduced to nothingness. You relied on yourself to cultivate spiritual techniques, which is a small accident. But if you want to kill me with this method, it is still a dream. At this time, Leng Shiqi's expression was also dignified. He calculated that he could not use the spiritual techniques cultivated by the system when facing the system. So he had been constantly comprehending, deducing, and fusing spiritual techniques. Reality proved that the fused spiritual techniques could be used, but Leng Shiqi neglected one thing, and that was the system's strength. From the looks of it, the system did not have a cultivation realm, nor did it have any techniques or spiritual techniques, but it did have a mysterious power. That power could easily break his fist and palm. Leng Shiqi once again condensed a long spear. The spear's body was instantly dyed with a dazzling golden light, forming countless small scales. He pointed the spear at the system and with an aura of death, he stabbed at the system. The system waved again, and the golden cross of the golden scale cross spear instantly dissipated. Leng Shiqi's expression didn't change. He pointed out a finger and the sound of thunder could be heard. A blood-red bolt of lightning that was wrapped in a dense baleful aura and violent lightning energy shot out. Lightning blood heavenly finger. The system's lifeless eyes finally showed a trace of fluctuation. Its hands slid down at the same time, and the blood-red lightning disappeared into the void. Chapter 384. Leng Shiqi had used 4 fused ultimate skills in succession. Although it did not cause any damage to the system, he had noticed some clues. The system did not seem to be aggressive, and its defense was very simple. He immediately thought of the fact that the system had been curled up like a fetus in the beginning, which meant that the system might have been in a state of recovery. This also confirmed his guess when he first obtained the system. One of the reasons why the system chose him was to help the system recover its power. From the battle just now, the power of the Thunderclap Blood Finger was enough for the system to take it seriously. Leng Shiqi's attack did not stop at all. His hands formed into claws, and the demonic aura around him surged. In the midst of the demonic aura and the demonic aura, the shadow of a demonic dragon was faintly discernible. Immediately, a pair of demonic dragon claws descended. Demonic dragon claws. The system stretched out its arms and an invisible X-shaped energy sprayed out, instantly shattering the 2 demonic dragon claws. Leng Shiqi's long sword trembled, and his body suddenly disappeared. Then a rain of flowers fell from the sky, turning into sharp sword energy. At the same time, hundreds of phantoms appeared from all directions, stabbing the sword energy from every angle. In an instant, the sword energy and the sword energy overflowed, and it was difficult to distinguish between the real and the fake. Dazzling flower confusion. At this moment, the system's eyes showed a touch of surprise and seriousness. This was the first time it had shown emotion. The system spread out its arms, and a translucent light shield appeared around it to protect it. Then a dense clanging sound could be heard. The sword energy that filled the sky slashed on the light shield, causing the light shield to cave in continuously, but it was not broken. Before the sword chi dissipated, Leng Shiqi used the nether spring ghostly steps and charged forward like a ghost. He was holding a saber in his hand. The system's eyes locked onto the sword, and it actually felt a trace of threat from it. Leng Shiqi's figure arrived in the blink of an eye. The long sword was unsheathed, and a cold sword energy flashed in the air. That sword light was extremely fast and sharp, instantly shattering the light shield around the system. The system crossed its arms in front of its body, and the blade slashed across, leaving 2 deep slash marks on his arms. The strange thing was that there was no blood in the system's body. Instead, there were strange black and white characters. Upon closer inspection, those characters were clearly a series of codes. At this time, Leng Shiqi's spiritual body also quickly dimmed, and his body shrunk by more than half. It was obvious that the short-lived move had drained all of his energy. The system's eyes were filled with fear after seeing Leng Shiqi's attack. It looked at the weakened Leng Shiqi and said, "What a powerful sword technique. You can cultivate this technique without using my power. You are worthy of being my chosen host. However, this is the end of it. It's time for a new host. Even if I fall into a deep sleep again, I can't keep you." At this point, the system revealed a murderous intent towards Leng Shiqi. However, Leng Shiqi gave a strange smile. He suddenly slashed down with his palm like a saber, and an invisible force slashed out. There seemed to be a mirror between Leng Shiqi and the system's consciousness. At this moment, this mirror seemed to have been cut diagonally from the middle, and the inside and outside of the mirror were dislocated. Similarly, the system's body was also dislocated. The system's upper body still maintained its murderous appearance, but from below its left shoulder to the right side of its waist, an almost undetectable scratch appeared, splitting its entire body into 2. A large amount of black and white light surged out of its body. At this time, the system's face finally showed an expression. It was an expression of shock, fear, and disbelief. It shouted in horror, "No! Impossible, impossible!" The technique Leng Shiqi used was the void-slashing godly sword, created by Tu Dang. This was a secret technique created by Tu Dang specifically to eliminate evil thoughts. It specialized in eliminating all kinds of consciousness. Evil thoughts, which were on par with Tu Dang's good thoughts, were easily eliminated by Leng Shiqi's sword. This showed how terrifying this secret technique was. However, this technique drained all of Leng Shiqi's strength, and made him completely lose the ability to fight. The system's body was divided into 2 halves, but the 2 halves were still connected by the black and white light. While the system exclaimed, it was still trying to retrieve the black and white light, as if that thing was extremely important to it. Seeing this, Leng Shiqi's heart skipped a beat. He forcefully controlled his spiritual body and began to snatch the black and white light. "Get lost. This is mine, it's all mine." The system roared in panic. It no longer had that godlike demeanor of looking down on mortals. Now, the 2 of them, with the system heavily injured and Leng Shiqi unable to continue fighting, began to wrestle with each other like street thugs. As they wrestled, they continued to fight for the black and white light. Leng Shiqi, who was in the middle of the tussle, made up his mind and began to swallow the black and white light. After swallowing it, Leng Shiqi's mind suddenly had some inexplicable things. More importantly, he felt that his strength had recovered a little. Although it was only a little, it was indeed recovered. Leng Shiqi was overjoyed and immediately began to swallow the black and white light that he had already snatched. The system felt the danger and worked even harder to retrieve the black and white light. When Leng Shiqi finished swallowing the black and white light that he had snatched, he felt that his strength had recovered about 20%. Although it was not much, it was enough. Leng Shiqi once again used his palm as a sword and slashed out with the void-slashing godly sword. The system's consciousness, which was already divided into 2 halves, was directly cut into 4 halves by this sword. Moreover, the system's consciousness's body was constantly collapsing, and the black and white light that it had just absorbed all spilled out again. Leng Shiqi's consciousness was also extremely weak. Not only did his body shrink rapidly, but he also became transparent and blurry. However, he was still frantically swallowing the black and white light that flowed out of the system's consciousness. Under this situation, the system's consciousness was on the verge of collapsing, and it had no power to compete with Leng Shiqi. It could only watch as Leng Shiqi swallowed all the black and white light. At this moment, Leng Shiqi raised his hand as if he was going to completely wipe out the system's consciousness. At this moment, the system's consciousness's head also split apart, and its lonely mouth spoke intermittently, "Do you think this is the end? In the future there will be a second me, a third me, and countless me's. You will die sooner or later." Leng Shiqi did not answer him. What answered him was the third sword, the void-slashing godly sword. The system's consciousness, which was already collapsing, finally turned into nothingness under this sword. Chapter 385. With the system's consciousness wiped out, Leng Shiqi finally let out a sigh of relief. However, there was no time for him to sigh because there was still a huge crisis in the outside world that could take his life at any time. Leng Shiqi hurriedly controlled his spiritual body to return to the illusion world. Just as he was about to return to his body, a rainbow-colored figure suddenly appeared. It was Meng Tianzong's consciousness. Leng Shiqi's heart sank. He no longer had any ability to fight. If Meng Tianzong attacked him, he wouldn't be able to resist at all. He had always regarded the system's consciousness as his biggest enemy. He didn't think that Meng Tianzong would attack him from behind. Meng Tianzong's rainbow-colored figure pointed at the void, and a rainbow-colored light entered his body. Leng Shiqi was immediately shocked, but strangely he wasn't injured, nor did he feel any pain. Instead he felt a warm feeling. At the same time, the huge illusion character that had been sealed in his illusion world shook, and a rainbow-colored light flowed out. The chant for the second layer of the 5-god flowing light technique appeared. Then Meng Tianzong's figure disappeared again. Just as Leng Shiqi was confused, he felt a huge change in his body. He hurriedly returned his consciousness to his body. The entire process of his fierce battle with the system seemed very long, but in reality, it had only lasted for a few breaths of time. At this moment he opened his eyes, and his entire body immediately crackled like beans exploding. He looked down and saw that on his upper body and head, there were 80 to 90 star-like lights. These were all spiritual cavities. The spirit aperture realm was different from the spirit pulse realm. In the spirit pulse realm, every time you open a spirit pulse, you can break through a small realm. However, in the spirit aperture realm, you need to open 9 spiritual cavities to break through to the next realm. When you open 81 spiritual cavities, you'll be at the peak of the spirit aperture realm. As for Leng Shiqi, he actually managed to open a total of 80 spiritual cavities in an instant. These spiritual cavities were all spiritual cavities that the 5-god flowing light technique needed to open. Leng Shiqi was shocked, but at the same time, he understood that the reason for this change must be because of Meng Tianzong's finger. When he was in the illusory spirit secret realm, he had also opened 9 spiritual veins in an instant. Although he didn't know what Meng Tianzong was planning, at least it was beneficial to him now. Since he had already opened so many spiritual cavities, it meant that there were no obstacles in his cultivation advancement, and he could absorb the energy inside the blood cocoon without any restraint. From Leng Shiqi opening 72 spiritual veins, reaching the unprecedented 10th level of the spiritual vein realm, to the mysterious mark on his forehead, to the obliteration of the system and the opening of the spiritual cavities. All of this happened in an extremely short period of time. Sang He Tong and the surrounding people also felt that Leng Shiqi's aura had reached the spirit aperture realm, and their expressions became strange. From their point of view, Sang He Tong's method of exploding Leng Shiqi was strange, but it had a high chance of success. However, they never thought that Leng Shiqi would borrow this energy to break through to the spirit aperture realm. However, these people still didn't think highly of Leng Shiqi because even if he was at the spirit aperture realm, he still wouldn't be able to withstand that terrifying energy. At most, he would be able to hold on for a while longer. Sang He Tong's expression was ugly as if he had eaten a fly, but his thoughts were the same as everyone else's. He hatefully said, "So what if you're at the spirit aperture realm? If you can't open your spiritual cavities, you'll still explode." Sang He Tong was right. For a spirit aperture realm cultivator, the hardest part wasn't the accumulation of spirit energy, but how to open their spiritual cavities. Spiritual cavities were different from spiritual veins. In fact, no matter which spiritual vein you opened, the method used was the same. As long as you had enough spirit energy and had meticulous control over your spirit energy, it wouldn't be too difficult. However, opening the spiritual cavities was completely different. Every spirit cultivator had 360 spiritual cavities, and every spiritual cavities had their own characteristics. Therefore, opening different spiritual cavities required different methods. And these methods, in a spirit cultivator sect, were passed down by word of mouth from the elders of the sect. In Sang He Tong's opinion, Leng Shiqi had just broken through to the spirit aperture realm and didn't know how to open the next spiritual cavities. Therefore, sooner or later he would explode and die. Unfortunately, he didn't know that Leng Shiqi had already opened a total of 81 spiritual cavities. The spiritual cavities were no longer an obstacle to his cultivation. What he needed the most right now was spirit energy. Soon after, Leng Shiqi began to circulate the 5 God-flowing light technique, absorbing the spirit energy in the blood cocoon like a whale. As for his cultivation, it was as if it had grown wings and soared into the sky. In half a cup of tea's time, his cultivation had exploded to the peak of the first level of the spirit aperture realm. Then, as if there were no bottlenecks between the first and second level, he broke through without any obstruction. Time continued to pass, and the blood cocoon around Leng Shiqi gradually faded. However, not only did Leng Shiqi not explode, his cultivation was actually increasing. Spirit aperture realm 2nd level, 3rd level, 4th level, 5th level. When he reached the 5th level of the spirit aperture realm, the blood cocoon around Leng Shiqi had become much dimmer. Spirit aperture realm required a lot of spirit energy to accumulate. Leng Shiqi had directly jumped from the 1st level to the 5th level, absorbing too much energy. As for Sang He Tong, he suddenly became stupefied because he realized that the energy he had accumulated was not enough for him to break through to the sky origin realm. Even if Leng Shiqi suddenly died, he, Sang He Tong, would not be able to break through. Sang He Tong's mouth trembled slightly as he muttered to himself, "How is this possible? How is this possible? No!" He suddenly roared towards the sky, "Who are you? Who are you? It's you who did this." Sang He Tong suddenly looked towards Tu Dang. His body emitted strands of black qi as he roared like a madman. Tu Dang was also very shocked by the changes in Leng Shiqi. He originally thought that Leng Shiqi was definitely going to die, and felt a lot of guilt in his heart. Now that he saw that Leng Shiqi was not only fine, but his cultivation had also increased greatly, he chuckled, "Little friend Lu's fortune is profound, and his life is not meant to end. He is a person with destiny." But what bullshit destiny? Back then you said that I did not have the destiny to break through to the sky origin realm, but I will do it for you to see. So it was all because of my words. Sang He Tong, did you think that even if little friend Lu and I did not appear, you would have broken through to the sky origin realm? Wrong, you were completely wrong from the beginning. The sky origin realm is not something that can be broken through with brute force, so you were destined to fail. Just as they were talking, the blood cocoon suddenly released a blood-colored blade aura that seemed to cut the world in half. Chapter 386. Sang He Tong never thought that Leng Shiqi's cultivation would soar, and he even dared to attack him. In Sang He Tong's view, Leng Shiqi's strike was comparable to a Gang Spirit Realm Master's strike. It was indeed amazing. Such a strike was nothing to Sang He Tong in the past, but now he was under Tu Dang's control and had no room to fight back. This was dangerous. Even though he was in the unity of heaven and men realm, he had not specially tempered his body. If he was hit by this strike, he would definitely die. The blood veins on Sang Hetong's body suddenly increased, and he looked like a man of blood. His body split open, and dozens of goo worms of different colors and shapes rushed out. Originally, with Sang Hetong's goo arts, he could control goo worms with a thought. He could also use goo worms to perform all sorts of strange methods. But now he could only release these goo worms to help him block the saber beam. The moment the goo worms appeared, Leng Shiqi's blade light also arrived. With an extremely soft sound, all of the goo worms were cut into two halves. Fortunately, these goo worms were carefully cultivated by Sang Hetong, and they helped him block the blade. But his heart was bleeding. These goo worms were not meant to be used like this. However, at this moment, a sharp aura quietly invaded his mind, causing his mental strength to fluctuate. The power was not strong and it did not hurt his mind, but it shook his mind. Seeing this, Tu Deng's eyes were suddenly filled with splendor. He clearly felt that Leng Shiqi's strike had the feeling of void destruction divine blade. The reason why Leng Shiqi stopped absorbing the power of the blood cocoon and turned to attack Sang Hetong was that he found that although his cultivation was soaring, the spiritual strength in his body was very heterogeneous. Even his 5th level of spirit aperture realm was a little unstable. He knew that one reason was that his cultivation had soared too fast, and the other reason was that the power in the blood cocoon was not pure enough, which led to his unstable foundation. Leng Shiqi made a prompt decision. He no longer coveted a temporary cultivation base and stopped absorbing the blood cocoon's power. But then again, even though he didn't want to absorb it, the energy still kept drilling into his body. Therefore he had to find a way to release this power. With his current cultivation level, it was enough for him to break free from Sang Hetong's restraints. Thus, he unsheathed his azure rain saber and slashed out with fleeting flash. However, this time was very different from the past. First of all, the power this saber absorbed was not his own power, but the power within the blood cocoon. That was why he didn't use much spirit force. In addition, the moment he swung his blade, he also used the void/divine blade. Unfortunately, he only used a trace of the rhythm of the void/slashing godly blade. However, this accidental combination also allowed Leng Shiqi to see the possibility of the combination of the ephemeral flower and the void-slaying godly blade. If one day in the future he really managed to fuse the ephemeral flash of the night and the void-slaying godly saber, he would truly be able to slash apart both his physical body and primordial spirit. Visible saber light could be dodged or blocked, but an invisible saber that specialized in slashing the primordial spirit was impossible to defend against. Just like the current Sang Hetong, he was caught off guard. In the instant he was distracted, Leng Shiqi waved his hand and hundreds of golden thread goo crawled towards Sang Hetong. Sang Hetong came back to his senses and found that the golden thread goo had already arrived in front of him. His body shook and he started to struggle, trying to break free from Tu Deng's control. A trace of blood suddenly flowed out from the corner of Tu Deng's mouth, but he still firmly restrained Sang Hetong. He knew that the most critical moment had arrived. Hundreds of golden thread goo crawled onto Sang Hetong's body and broke through his skin, drilling into his body. Sang Hetong immediately screamed. His body was filled with dense spirit energy. However, the golden thread goo fed on the spirit energy of myriad spirit goo devouring technique. Not only were they unharmed, they even grew stronger. Normally, Sang Hetong had many ways to kill these golden silk goo, but unfortunately he was powerless now and could only watch as the golden silk goo devoured his spirit energy. Soon, Sang Hetong's spirit energy aura began to drop rapidly. He had absorbed everyone's chi and blood and reached the limit of unity of heaven realm, but now he had fallen to the late stage of unity of heaven realm and was still falling. Late stage, middle stage, early stage. It didn't stop until Sang Hetong's cultivation fell to the late stage of spirit astral realm, because all the golden thread goo were saturated and could no longer devour his spirit energy. During this process, Leng Shiqi held the Qinglin saber in his hand. All of his spiritual energy, mental energy, chi and blood force, as well as his firm will, including the power of the blood cocoons, were mobilized and compressed to the extreme. The Qinglin saber began to tremble and let out a buzzing sound. Just as the golden thread goo stopped, Leng Shiqi slashed out with the strongest saber he had ever used. At this moment, the entire space seemed to be frozen. A ray of saber light flashed as if it was going to cut the world in half. Leng Shiqi, who was at the 5th level of spirit aperture realm, condensed all of his strength for a brief moment, and its power was indescribable. Of course, Leng Shiqi didn't have the strength to cut through space, but it was no problem for him to cut a person in half. That person was Sang Hetong. Faced with Leng Shiqi's saber light, which was even stronger than before, he couldn't help but show a horrified expression. Even now, he still had this expression on his face, but his expression had already frozen, because his body had been completely cut in half from the middle. Strangely, not a single drop of blood flowed out from his body. Instead, there was a stinky and disgusting mucus. Those were the goo worms that he had been raising in his body. With the death of his body, those goo worms also died. At this moment, this person who had toyed with everyone in the palm of his hand was finally filled with hatred. Ding! Leng Shiqi suddenly knelt down and used the Qinglin saber to support his body. His final move, a brief moment, seemed to have used up all of his strength. However, immediately after, cracks appeared on the Qinglin saber's body, and it finally shattered with a loud bang. Even a fourth-level spirit tool couldn't withstand the terrifying power of a brief moment. At this moment in Leng Shiqi's eyes, a green shadow floated above Sang Hitong's body. With a thought, the green shadow entered his body. Immediately he felt a strange power cleansing his body and increasing his mental strength. This was the power of Sang Hitong's remnant soul. A remnant soul of the unity of heaven realm. This power allowed Leng Shiqi to recover quite a bit. He stood up and walked forward, directly taking off Sang Hitong's mustard seed bracelet. No one objected to this action because they were still in shock. Chapter 387. Everyone was shocked beyond words when they saw Sang Hetong die. At first, Leng Shiqi stood out, but they didn't have much hope for Leng Shiqi, because Leng Shiqi's cultivation wasn't enough. Although the late stage of Spirit Pulse realm wasn't weak, it was nothing to Sang Hetong, who was in the realm of one with the world. Later, Sang Hetong used the power of blood to pour into Leng Shiqi, wanting to make him explode. Everyone thought that Leng Shiqi was about to die. However, Leng Shiqi continued to absorb the power, and his cultivation soared. He even broke through to the Spirit Aperture realm. This brought a glimmer of hope to the crowd. However, he was still able to control the formation even when his body was under control. In an instant, thousands of people exploded. The rich power of qi and blood formed a blood cocoon around Leng Shiqi. Seeing that Leng Shiqi was about to die, he didn't die. Instead, his cultivation broke through, and he even broke through to the 5th level of the Spirit Aperture realm. Since when was it so easy to break through to the Spirit Aperture realm? One had to know that the most difficult part of the Spirit Aperture realm wasn't cultivating spirit energy, but opening the spirit apertures. They had never heard of anyone who could open dozens of spirit apertures in a few breaths of time. Everything that happened had completely broken everyone's understanding. How could they not be shocked? What surprised them even more was Leng Shiqi's saber. Especially the saber that killed Sang Hetong at the end. That saber caused even the spirit astral realm experts to feel a chill run down their spines. Under the saber, the space was almost frozen. Who could block such a saber technique? Even Sang Hetong couldn't block it and died under the saber. A person in the Spirit Aperture realm had crossed 2 realms and killed Sang Hetong, who was in the realm of one with the world. No one would believe such a thing. Even if it happened right in front of their eyes, they still found it hard to accept. In fact, the biggest contributor to Sang and Tong's death was Tudang. Tuding restricted 90% of Sang Hetong's strength. In addition, Leng Shiqi made Sang Hetong's cultivation fall to Gang Spirit Realm with the help of Golden Thread Venomous Insect. Therefore, Sang Hetong was killed when Sang Hetong had no ability to resist. Otherwise, Leng Shiqi would not be able to deal with Sang Hetong's strange goo arts. No matter how amazing Leng Shiqi's slash was, Sang Hetong would be able to easily break it. After Sang and Tong died, the blood sacrifice formation collapsed on its own without anyone controlling it. Everyone was finally able to move freely again. The blood prison that trapped Yu Ruifeng and Prince Gus had also disappeared. The two of them were now skin and bones and their auras were very weak. It was obvious that they had lost a lot of blood and qi. As for his cultivation, he had fallen to the middle or late stage of Gang Spirit Realm. When they came to Leng Shiqi, they all looked at him with gratitude. However, when Prince Gus looked at Tuding, he showed a thoughtful expression. Tuding did not pay attention to them. He was still sitting cross-legged, murmuring to Sang Hetong's body, as if he was reciting some scriptures. At this time, the remaining 2,000 or 3,000 Imperial Guards and Masters all gathered around and asked about Prince Gus's well-being. Prince Heli was dead, so it was conceivable that Prince Gus would be their leader in the future. More importantly, Sang Hetong was also dead, and even Princess Bess was killed in the chaos. It seemed that Prince Gus was the best candidate for the throne. As for Chu Li, the Minister of State Affairs, they did not take him seriously. No matter how great Chu Li's prestige was in the imperial court, he did not have any military power, and his strength was negligible. He was not qualified to compete with Prince Gus for the throne. In this way, Prince Gus could be regarded as the next king, so these people naturally cared more about him. Prince Gus chatted with these people for a while and let them go to plunder the resources of the Gu God sect. Tuding, the former sect leader, did not have the slightest reaction. Prince Gus walked to Leng Shiqi and Yu Ruifeng, clasped his fist and said, Lord Yu, Lord Lu, it is thanks to you two that we can get rid of Sang He Tong and the Gu God sect. Otherwise we'll all die here. Leng Shiqi did not expect that he could be called Lord Lu by Prince Gus, so he immediately said a few polite words. As for Yu Ruifeng, after taking a deep look at Leng Shiqi, he began to look around. At this moment, 90% of the people had gone to plunder the resources in groups. Only a few spirit cultivators of the 4 realms of Sky Human were protecting Prince Gus, and there were only 4 Dark Thunder Guards left. Among them was Guan Feihong. Leng Shiqi had noticed that something was wrong long ago. He had called Guan Feihong to the edge of the formation, so he was not affected. However, the other Dark Thunder Guards had suffered heavy losses. Even Yuan Tsang, the great supervisor of the South region, had died. Yu Ruifeng's expression was gloomy to the extreme. The Dark Thunder Guards had only come to Zhulu country to go through the motions, but the king had suddenly died, and they were also swept into this huge vortex. In the end, they fell into Sang He Tong's trap, causing them to lose more than half of their manpower. These people were all carefully nurtured by Yu Ruifeng. How could he not feel heartache? But then again, if it were not for Leng Shiqi and Tuding turning the tide, everyone here would have died. In the end, they all became stepping stones for Sang He Tong to break through to the Sky Yuan realm. It was already good enough to be able to survive. Yu Ruifeng glanced at Leng Shiqi and Tuding. He did not know how Leng Shiqi met the previous sect leader of the Gu God sect, nor did he know why Leng Shiqi had such a strange gu like the golden silk gu. He also did not know what Leng Shiqi had experienced when he left the king's city, but the result was that Leng Shiqi had saved him. Because of this, Yu Ruifeng would not ask Leng Shiqi. He said to Leng Shiqi, "Back then your master saved me once. Today you save me again. I don't know when I will be able to repay the kindness of both of you." Leng Shiqi immediately replied, "Martial uncle, what are you talking about? There is no need to mention repayment between us." "Ah, good. Yu Ruifeng will recognize you as my nephew." Yu Ruifeng patted Leng Shiqi's shoulder and laughed. Prince Gus looked at Yu Ruifeng. He also found that there were only 6 Dark Thunder Guards left, including Yu Ruifeng and Leng Shiqi. How should he explain this to the Dark Thunder Guards? How should he explain to the Thunder Flame dynasty? Unknowingly, Prince Gus had put himself in the shoes of a king. Prince Gus walked over with a solemn expression. Yu Ruifeng knew what he was thinking with a glance. "Prince Gus, I can report this matter to the Thunder Flame dynasty. However, I want 50% of the Gu God sect's cultivation resources and I want priority in choosing them." Upon hearing this, Prince Gus felt relieved. If Yu Ruifeng had reported the truth, then all the blame would have been pushed onto the dead Sang Hetong. However, he soon felt a wave of heartache. Yu Ruifeng wanted 50% of the Gu God sect's cultivation resources. This was an exorbitant demand. The Gu God sect was not only a first-rate faction, but also the national religion of the Zhulu country. Who knew how much wealth they had accumulated over the years? However, Prince Gus agreed without any hesitation. As long as he could spend money, he was naturally willing. Chapter 388. Leng Shiqi could understand Yu Ruifeng's need for resources. Because Sang Hetong had drained a large amount of qi, blood and spirit energy, Yu Ruifeng's qi and blood loss was very serious, and his spirit energy cultivation had also dropped by a large realm. Therefore, he naturally needed a large amount of resources to recover his cultivation as soon as possible. After receiving an answer from Yu Ruifeng, Prince Gus brought people to inspect the resources, so as to prevent people from filling their pockets. Yu Ruifeng began to adjust his breathing under the protection of several Dark Lightning Guards. At this time, Tu Deng sighed slightly. Leng Shiqi stepped forward and bowed, "Many thanks to Senior for saving my life." Tu Deng didn't care about this matter. He sighed, "Ai, this old man seems to have seen his past self in Sang Hetong, and also seems to have seen another version of himself. At that time, if Sang Hetong hadn't imprisoned this old man, perhaps one day this old man would have done such an intolerable thing. Power is really too tempting." Sang Hetong was completely addicted to the pursuit of power, and even this old man almost fell for it. Little friend Lu was able to take the initiative to stop absorbing the power of the blood cocoon to increase his cultivation. This old man admires you for having such a strong will. Leng Shiqi modestly said, Senior is too kind. This old man isn't overpraising you. Little friend Lu has the potential to become a supreme expert. If he doesn't die young, he will definitely become a powerful expert in the future. Now that this matter is over, the Gu God sect that this old man created has been completely destroyed. This old man's heart can be considered to have no more worries. From now on, this old man will save the dying and heal the injured with this ruined body of mine. This can more or less make up for the sins this old man committed in the past. After saying this, Tu Deng turned around to leave. Senior, wait. Leng Shiqi stopped him and quickly stepped forward to take out a mustard seed bag. This is? Leng Shiqi said with a smile. Senior will know when you see it. Tu Deng's spirit entered the mustard seed bag. Then, even though he had experienced a lot and his will was as firm as a mountain at this time, he revealed an expression of shock, joy, and eagerness. The mustard seed bag contained the other 8 sets of scriptures. There were hundreds of scriptures. Little friend Lu, what are you doing? Leng Shiqi said seriously, Senior, to be honest, I came across these books by accident. They don't seem to be products of the falling star continent. Junior is slow-witted because he was unable to comprehend the profoundness within. As the saying goes, treasured swords are given to heroes. I will give these to Senior. Tuding, to be precise, it should be Tuding's kindness, was the only person Leng Shiqi had seen since he came to this world who was suitable for these sutras. Rather than leaving it here to collect dust, he might as well gift it to Tu Deng. This was his sincere offer. Of course, it would be best if he could do her a favor. Tuding viewed these scriptures as treasures, but he still shook his head and said, I can't take your things for free. It's a pity that I don't have anything valuable on me. How about this? I can promise you 3 things. As he spoke, he took out 3 emerald green jade beads and said, This old man will still be in Zhulu country in the next few years. Little friend, if you come with this token, this old man can do 3 things for little friend, as long as you don't go against this old man's wishes. Leng Shiqi's heart shook and he was pleasantly surprised. He originally thought that it would be fine as long as he could do a favor, but he didn't expect Tuding to be so generous. This was equivalent to him being able to use a Unity of Heaven expert 3 times. This gave Leng Shiqi a lot more confidence. Leng Shiqi also knew that since Tuding said this, he wouldn't take it back. He didn't stand on ceremony and directly took the 3 jade beads and carefully put them away. Seeing this, Tuding revealed a smile. Leng Shiqi suddenly thought of something and immediately asked, Senior, what is the origin of this formation that Sang Hetong used? To be honest, this junior has seen a similar formation in a secret realm before. Tuding heard this and immediately frowned. This old man actually doesn't know much about this formation. This formation is an ancient book that this old man obtained by chance when he was young and traveling. I've never paid too much attention to it. A few decades ago, Sang Hetong suddenly discovered this thing and was very obsessed with it. This old man was afraid that he would go astray, so I destroyed the ancient book that recorded the formation. I didn't think that Sang Hetong would be able to deduce the complete formation from a few words. AI, if he put all his effort into comprehending the power of heaven and earth, he might be able to rely on his own strength to break through to the heaven origin realm. Hearing this, Leng Shiqi nodded. 10,000 years ago, Meng Tianzong had also killed over 10,000 disciples of the Divine Illusion Palace in order to break through. Meng Tianzong and Sang Hetong's methods were almost the same, so Leng Shiqi thought that there was some connection between the two. It seemed that everything was just a coincidence. So that's how it is. Little friend, if there is nothing else, this old man will take his leave. Farewell, Senior. Tuding said and left. He didn't even look at the Gu God Peak from start to finish. Leng Shiqi looked around and saw that there was nothing else for him to do. Thus, he walked to Yu Ruifeng's side and closed his eyes to adjust his breathing. Now that too many accidents had occurred in the process of his breakthrough, he needed to sort them out properly. First, he was more concerned about the strange realm between the Spirit Pulse realm and the Spirit Aperture realm. He called it the Spirit Pulse realm level 10. When he was at the Spirit Pulse realm level 10, a door appeared in his spirit sea. That door helped him absorb a huge amount of blood chi. Otherwise, he would have exploded before he could break through to the Spirit Aperture realm. But what was that door? Leng Shiqi didn't know. He had never heard of such a situation in the many cultivation methods he cultivated. He could only look through ancient books to find out. If he couldn't, he could ask Wu Xiang. Other than that, What Leng Shiqi was more concerned about were the strange memories that suddenly appeared in his mind. The fall of gods and devils, the collapse of heaven and earth, mountains of corpses and seas of bones, and the last thing that appeared was the Dark Shadow clan. Although Leng Shiqi didn't see the changes in himself at that time, he could feel a cold mark on his forehead. That mark also helped him absorb a lot of blood qi. Therefore, the Dark Shadow clan became a target for him to investigate in the future. However, whether it was that door or the mysterious Dark Shadow clan, they were far less important than another thing, and that was the system. After Leng Shiqi erased the system's consciousness, he didn't have time to check the system's changes. He immediately opened the system. The interface didn't change much. First was his personal information: name, Leng Shiqi Lu Xingji, cultivation, spirit aperture realm level 5 status, insufficient spiritual power bloodline, Dark Shadow clan unknown management authority, 37% cultivation method. Cold Underworld Treasure Golden Mystic Yang Art 5 God Flowing Light Art 1000 Turns Fantasy World Art 10,000 Goose Spirit Devouring Technique Spiritual Skills. Rank 5 Spiritual Skill Golden Mountain Breaking Seal Rank 5 Spiritual Skill Bright Sun. Mystic Yang Palm Rank 5 Spiritual Skill Cold Underworld Palm Rank 5 Spiritual Skill Cold Underworld Palm Secret Technique Void Slashing God Destroying Blade System Coins. 1382 The biggest changes in his information were his bloodline and management authority. The bloodline showed that he had the bloodline of the Dark Shadow clan. Moreover, he had another unknown bloodline. However, other than that strange scene, Leng Shiqi's body didn't change at all. Then what was the use of this bloodline? He frowned and thought for a while but couldn't figure it out. He simply stopped thinking about it and focused on the management authority. Especially when there was a 37% after these 4 words. Does this mean that I have 37% of the management authority in the system? But how do I use this authority? Then he opened the system inventory. Everything was normal. He then opened the map system. The 4 words that entered his eyes made his whole body tremble. Map fully opened. 10,000 system coins will be used. Fully opened. Leng Shiqi stared at these words, afraid that his eyes were playing tricks on him. The system map was a very useful thing. Not only could he observe the terrain, but he could also use the fate skill to teleport. However, the system map had a huge flaw. That was that Leng Shiqi had to open the map himself. If he could open the map fully, this flaw would be completely solved. Leng Shiqi felt that the 10,000 system coins would be worth it. Unfortunately, he didn't have that many system coins right now. This matter would have to be delayed for a while. Then he opened the system store. There were still only 4 items in the system store. However, a refresh button appeared at the bottom right corner. He looked at the description and learned that he had 3 chances to refresh the system store every day. The biggest drawback of the system store was that it was too random. Now that he had 3 more chances to refresh, it was quite good. Finally, when Leng Shiqi was about to exit the system store, a line of words popped up on the interface. The system is about to be upgraded. It will take 30 natural days. The system will not be able to be used during the upgrade. Upgrade? Leng Shiqi was no stranger to this message. Every time he broke through a realm, the system would be upgraded. He was already used to it. He first transferred the things he used frequently to the mustard seed bracelet and chose yes. However, to his surprise, another message appeared. Administrator, Host 01 has requested to upgrade the system. Do you agree? Leng Shiqi's heart skipped a beat as he stared at the line of words. After a while he said, yes. System upgrade commencing. Progress 0.001%. Chapter 389. Leng Shiqi felt like he was cheating when he saw the changes in the system map and the system store. But the last request of the system made him feel that he had the authority of a manager. At the same time, he was looking forward to the upgrade of the system. Now that he had a lot of administrative authority, he would be able to use more authority after the upgrade of the system. In the end, Leng Shiqi began to study the 5 God Flowing Light formula. After he reached the Spirit Aperture realm, the second level of the 5 God Flowing Light formula appeared, which was enough for him to reach the Gang Spirit realm. Besides, there were 2 new spiritual techniques. They were the 5 God Intimidating Spell and the Light Rotation Formation, both of which were at the 5th level. The 5 God Intimidating Spell was the upgraded version of the intimidating spell he had practiced before. It used the body of a god to enter the enemy's consciousness and intimidate the enemy's mind. Every time the 5-god intimidating spell was upgraded, one more god's shadow would appear. When the spell was completed, it could produce 5 god's shadows. The light rotation formation was an offensive spiritual technique, which could be summoned behind the user to activate the light rotation formation, which was very powerful. Leng Shiqi didn't choose to upgrade the 2 spiritual techniques with unlimited skill points. Instead, he decided to practice them with his own strength. First of all, when he was fighting with the system's consciousness, Leng Shiqi knew that he didn't have enough means. In particular, the system's words before it died made him feel a little uneasy. The system's consciousness might appear again in the future, so he had to be careful. Second of all, Leng Shiqi was born with a great talent for the 5-god flowing light formula. When he was in the Phantom Spirit Secret Realm, it only took him 2 hours to reach the first level. Therefore, Leng Shiqi decided to practice the 2 spiritual techniques by himself. Now that he had some time, he began to understand the mnemonics. In the afternoon, Prince Gus came. Lord Yu, the resources of the Gu God sect have been sorted out. Yu Ruifeng stood up and took Leng Shiqi and the rest of the Dark Thunder Guards to the Gu God Temple of the Gu God sect. At this time, all the resources of the Gu God sect were piled up in different categories. Looking around, it actually filled up half of the hall. The Gu God sect was a first-rate power, and it was also the national religion of Zhulu country. Not only did it have a lot of resources, but they were also very precious. Leng Shiqi secretly swallowed his saliva. Prince Gus said, Lord Yu, according to our previous agreement, you can take a limited 50% of the resources here. Losing half of the resources really made Prince Gus' heart ache, but compared to the throne, compared to the stability of Zhulu country, it was nothing. However, Yu Ruifeng turned to Leng Shiqi and said, Nephew, you can have 10% of my 50%. You can choose first. Both Leng Shiqi and Prince Gus were stunned when they heard this. Prince Gus didn't expect Yu Ruifeng to be so generous. However, since Leng Shiqi had saved their lives, he didn't feel ashamed to receive 10% of the resources. Leng Shiqi was also a little surprised because he had already taken Sang He Tong's mustard seed bracelet. The collection of the leader of the Gu God sect was priceless. He was also very satisfied. Of course, he would definitely take the resources that were sent to his door. The reason why Yu Ruifeng did this was nothing more than to get closer to him. Today, Leng Shiqi saved him and showed his incomparable terrifying talent. He was also favored by Eunuch Gao, one of the Dark Thunder Guards. His future was limitless. It was obviously a wise choice to give him benefits and investment when his cultivation was not high and his reputation was not well known. Therefore, Leng Shiqi politely said a few words and began to choose. First of all, what he needed most was a suitable spiritual sword. Because the Green Rain sword could not withstand the power of the short-lived flash in the pan, he urgently needed a 5th level or even better spiritual sword. Leng Shiqi went straight to the area where the spiritual weapons were piled. He looked around and found that the highest level of spiritual weapon was only 6th level. 6th level spiritual weapons were unattainable for ordinary spirit cultivators. Generally, only the masters of the Gang Spirit realm were qualified to have them. But for a first-class sect like the Gu God sect, it was a bit shabby. Leng Shiqi thought about it. The Gu God sect focused on the cultivation of the Gu God sect, and their disciples rarely used spiritual weapons, so he was relieved. He kept looking around and soon fixed his eyes on a spiritual sword. The sword was pitch black, about the same length as the Green Rain sword, but the blade was wider. There were small saw teeth on the back of the sword, which looked very ferocious. The whole sword gave people a feeling of fierceness. Most importantly, even if the sword was not moved, it would faintly emit a faint demonic chi. Obviously, it was a demonic sword. 6th level demonic sword, demon arrival battle sword. Leng Shiqi was immediately attracted by the demon arrival battle sword. He reached out to hold the sword, and the demon arrival battle sword trembled violently, as if it wanted to break free from his hand. Leng Shiqi was surprised and happy. The sword seemed to have a trace of spirituality. As far as he knew, among the spiritual weapons, those below the 7th level were called spiritual weapons, and those below the 7th level were called treasured weapons. Because the 7th level treasured weapons had a certain degree of spirituality, they could be more compatible with the user's cultivation method and spiritual skills, and their power would be multiplied. The demon arrival battle sword was at the 6th level, but it had a trace of spirituality, which meant that it was very close to the 7th level. Leng Shiqi snorted softly, and the vigorous spiritual power in his body operated, instantly making the demon arrival battle sword behave. Then he did not put the sword into the mustard seed bracelet, but carried it on his back, nourishing it with his aura. With the addition of the 6th level demonic sword, not only did it replace the Azure Rain sword, but it also increased Leng Shiqi's strength by another level. He patted the demon or rival battle sword with satisfaction, and continued to choose from the pile of spiritual weapons. After all, spiritual weapons were the most direct things to increase one's battle strength. Next, he chose the level 5 spirit tools, the sharp peak spear and the profound ice bow. In this way, his most commonly used weapons were greatly strengthened. After choosing the spiritual weapons, Leng Shiqi's next target was materials. In the past, Leng Shiqi did not like to collect materials, and almost all of them were sold to the system. But now that he was in the Spirit Aperture realm, it was different. The most important resource in the Spirit Aperture realm was the Awakening Pill. Although Leng Shiqi had already opened 81 spiritual apertures, this was not his limit, so he needed a large amount of Awakening Pills. And in the Illusory Spirit realm, he had obtained the recipe for the Awakening Pill, so now he needed to collect a large amount of materials to refine the Awakening Pill. After a while, Leng Shiqi filled 2 mustard seed bags with materials. He estimated that his 10% should be enough, so he prepared to stop. But at this time he took a fancy to another item. Chapter 390. That thing was called the Scarlet Blood Jade. It was a heavenly treasure that was used to strengthen the body. It was rank 6. After Leng Shiqi absorbed a large amount of blood essence and Sang Hetong's soul, his body was stuck between the late stage of the spirit transformation realm and the spirit vein realm. If he were to slowly refine it, it would take a long time, so he coveted the Scarlet Blood Jade. Leng Shiqi silently took the Scarlet Blood Jade, and Yu Ruifeng didn't say anything. At this point there was nothing else he wanted. There were no cultivation methods or spirit techniques here because all of the Gu God sect's cultivation methods were stored in another pavilion. Unfortunately, the pavilion suddenly collapsed after Sang Hetong's death. It seemed that Sang Hetong had done something to the inside. However, Leng Shiqi didn't lack cultivation methods or spirit techniques. Not to mention the most profound cultivation method of the Gu God sect, the 10,000 Gu spirit devouring art, was on him. It was even more complete than the one Sang Hetong had. Next, it was Yu Ruifeng's turn to choose his 40%. What Yu Ruifeng chose were basically all elixirs that were used to replenish his qi, blood, and spiritual energy. After he finished choosing, the group packed up and left the Gu God Peak to return to the King's City. Leng Shiqi suddenly thought of someone who had never shown up before. It was Princess Carol. Leng Shiqi remembered that after he lured out the experts of the Gu God sect, Princess Carol had never appeared. Logically speaking, she was an expert at the Spirit Aperture realm, and her battle prowess was not weak. However, she had never shown her face from beginning to end. He didn't know where Princess Carol had run off to, but now that the situation was set, she couldn't do anything by herself. When everyone reached the mountainside, Leng Shiqi suddenly stopped in his tracks as if he had thought of something. He said to Yu Ruifeng, "Lord Yu, I remember that there are a few Gu worm caves nearby. I want to take some back to study." Yu Ruifeng agreed without hesitation. "It's okay. Go ahead." "Thank you, Lord," Leng Shiqi said and left the group, rushing towards the Gu worm cave. When Leng Shiqi was at the spirit vein realm, he could only raise 1,000 Gu worms, and most of them were golden silk Gu. The golden silk Gu was used to counter the 10,000 Gu spirit devouring art. But now, there were only 3 people who cultivated the 10,000 Gu spirit devouring art. They were himself, Tu Dang and Princess Carol. Thus, the golden silk Gu's effect was greatly reduced. In addition, Leng Shiqi reached the 5th layer of the Spirit Aperture realm and could raise 2,000 Gu worms. Thus, he came here to replenish his Gu worms. Fortunately, the Imperial Guards did not destroy these Gu worm caves. Because these caves contained countless Gu worms, it was quite troublesome to begin with. Moreover, if no one nurtured and raised them, these Gu worms would die in a short period of time. Thus, the Imperial Guards did not pay attention to the Gu worm cave. Leng Shiqi immediately activated the myriad Gu spirit devouring technique and entered one of the Gu worm caves. He habitually activated his supercilious eyes to prevent anyone from coming over. But he immediately sensed Princess Carol's aura not far from him. At this moment, Leng Shiqi finally understood. It turned out that Princess Carol had been hiding in this Gu worm cave. These countless Gu worms had completely isolated her aura. No wonder no one had discovered her. However, regardless of whether she was here to collect Gu worms or to avoid disaster, Lung Shichi still had a debt to settle with her. Princess Kahlua was currently in another goo worm cave. She was concentrating on forming hand seals. In front of her, numerous goo worms were devouring each other. But right at this moment, a familiar voice resounded. "Princess Carol, you have truly harmed me." Hearing this voice, Princess Carol's body trembled. She almost lost control of the seals in her hands. This voice came from Lung Shichi, who was disguised as Wuxia. To Princess Carol, the appearance of this voice was completely out of her expectations. In fact, when she saw Lung Shichi enter Goo God Peak, she sneaked into Goo God Peak from another direction. Later, Lung Shichi really lured all the experts of the 4 realms of human and heaven, and Princess Carol secretly came to the Goo Cave. She did not forget her original purpose, which was to find a way to detoxify the princess. Not long after she entered the Goo Cave, she sensed that the Goo God sect had activated the sect protecting formation. She knew that the princess, the main combat faction, and the Dark Thunder Guards had definitely come to fight. But Princess Carol did not come out because she also felt that their side would definitely win. But later, there were waves of spirit energy fluctuations that made her heart palpitate from the peak, making her feel uneasy. Unfortunately, even if she went out, she could not change the situation of the battle. It was better to continue refining goo here and detoxify the princess. At this moment, Lung Shichi suddenly appeared here. He clearly did not come in, but he could call out her name. This made her feel incredulous. But what was even more incredulous was that Lung Shichi actually walked into the Goo Cave. He walked to Princess Carol's side. Princess Carol looked at Lung Shichi in shock. Not just anyone could enter the Goo Worm Cave. One had to have a high level of goo techniques to enter. Otherwise, one would definitely be eaten to death by 50 goo worms. But when she saw that Lung Shichi's body was surging with green light that was of the same origin as hers, she was even more shocked. She exclaimed, 10,000 goo spirit devouring technique? How can you know the 10,000 goo spirit devouring technique? Lung Shichi said coldly, Princess Carol, you're really forgetful. Could it be that you've forgotten that you've spread this cultivation technique in Misty Chi City? Also, shouldn't I be the one asking the questions? Princess Carol's expression froze. She recalled that she had indeed passed on the first 2 levels of the myriad goo spirit devouring technique back then. They were all from the same organization, so it made sense that this Wuxia would obtain the cultivation technique. However, the 10,000 goo spirit devouring technique was not an ordinary technique. This kind of goo technique was very difficult to cultivate without guidance. But now, not only did he cultivate it, but he could also use it freely. This alone was shocking enough. What made her even more puzzled and surprised was that Wuxia cultivated an extremely vicious technique with heavy yin energy. But now, he could actually use the 10,000 goo spirit devouring technique? He could actually cultivate 2 techniques at the same time? Lung Shichi ignored Princess Carol's shocked expression and said, Your Highness, you said before that if I helped you lure away the experts of the Goo God sect, you would give me the mind-controlling goo. But you suddenly disappeared. It really took me a while to find you. Chapter 391. Lung Shichi didn't give Princess Carol any face. He said sternly, Princess Carol, I will ask you one question. I risked my life to help you lure out the experts of the Goo God sect and fulfilled my promise. Will you give me the mind-controlling insect or not? Speaking of this, the spirit energy in his body circulated rapidly, emitting the aura of the 5th level of the spirit aperture realm. Moreover, it contained traces of killing intent. Princess Carol's expression suddenly changed. 5th level of the spirit aperture realm. You were hiding your cultivation before. This is my true strength, so Princess Carol, don't think you can get away by luck. With your cultivation at the 2nd level of the spirit aperture realm, you can't escape from me. Of course, if you hand over the mind-controlling insect, I can let bygones be bygones. Lung Shichi followed Princess Carol's words and said coldly. Princess Carol's face became pale. To tell you the truth, I don't have the mind-controlling insect on me. Are you playing with me? Lung Shichi's eyes released a ferocious killing intent. Don't worry, Your Excellency. Right now, we have something 100 times more precious than the mind-controlling insect in front of us. Lung Shichi couldn't help but be a little surprised. Oh? What is it? The Goo King. Princess Carol opened her mouth and said these 2 words. Lung Shichi looked at the goo worms that were still fighting and devouring each other. They were very similar to the people on the Blood Mist Island. Princess Carol explained, if I'm not wrong, the Goo God sect should have been destroyed by the two princes and my mother. These goo worms in the cave naturally became ownerless. I once comprehended the secret method of an ancient secret scroll by chance and learned the method to cultivate the Goo King. If everything goes well, we can use these goo worms in the cave to cultivate an unprecedented Goo King. At that time, I only need to use it to detoxify my mother, and then the Goo King will belong to your excellency. Lung Shichi was very interested when he heard about the Goo King. These goo worms would self-destruct after a while, so using them to cultivate the Goo King could be considered making the best use of them. However, from Princess Carol's words, it seemed that she didn't know the truth of what happened at the summit, nor did she know that Bess was actually dead. But Lung Shichi didn't expose her. He asked, "How can I trust your highness? I dare not flatter your highness's credibility." Princess Carol solemnly said, "I won't joke around with my mother's life. Besides, my life is in your hands, so what are you worried about?" Lung Shichi shook his head. "No matter what Princess Carol says, I won't believe you unless you let me plant a goo worm in your body." "Planting goo?" Princess Carol snickered inwardly. She had the 10,000 goo spirit devouring art, so how could she be afraid of goo worms? But when Lung Shichi took out a few golden thread goo, Princess Kaluo's expression showed some panic. "Why do you have the golden silk goo? No, you have also cultivated the 10,000 goo devouring spirit technique, so how can you control the golden silk goo?" Lung Shichi frowned. "Your highness has too many questions. If you want me to believe you, plant the golden silk goo. If your highness goes back on her words, half of your cultivation will be crippled. Then how can I trust you to take out the golden silk goo?" "Umph." Lung Shichi coldly snorted. "It seems that your highness hasn't realized the current situation. You only have two choices. Plant the golden silk goo and give the Goo King to me. I will naturally remove the golden silk goo for you. Or die." Princess Carol's body trembled with anger, but she had no other choice. For her own life and her mother's life, she nodded. "Very good." Lung Shichi stretched out his hand, and several golden silk goo landed on Princess Carol's arm and drilled into her skin. Princess Carol didn't resist at all. Lung Shichi smiled with satisfaction. "Your highness is truly sensible. How long will it take to nurture the Goo King?" Princess Carol suppressed her anger, but she didn't show it, replying, "Nurturing the Goo King is easier said than done. Although there are countless goo worms to use, it will take at least 5 days. Moreover, it might not succeed." Lung Shichi thought to himself, 5 days I can accept it. After Prince Gusi inherits the throne, I will have to hold her accountable for this, which will take a few days. Thus he said, "Fine, but I believe that Princess Carol will succeed. I will come back in 5 days. I hope Princess Carol won't do anything stupid during this time." Saying so, he directly left the goo worm cave and set up a lightning destruction formation and golden silk goo near several goo worm caves. If Princess Carol dared to escape, her fate would be miserable. Afterwards, he didn't leave in a hurry, but went to another goo worm cave and picked over 1,000 goo worms. Even if he could obtain the Goo King in the future, these goo worms had their own uses. It would be a waste if he didn't take them. On the other side, Prince Gusi ignored his injuries and led the Imperial Guards at full speed, using only half a day to rush back to King City. The reason why he was so anxious was because Sang and Tong had said that if he succeeded in killing everyone and breaking through to Heaven Origin stage, he would help Elder Chuli ascend the throne. Therefore, Sang and Tong might have left something in King City, and Prince Gusi had to hurry back to deal with it. Sure enough, when they rushed back to King City, the whole place was solemn, and there were ceremonial guards erected everywhere. It was clearly a ceremony for a new king to ascend the throne. Prince Gusi pulled over a guard and asked, "What's going on?" The guard trembled. "Lord Elder Chuli is preparing to ascend the throne." Impudent. What right does he have to ascend the throne? Who gave him the courage? Prince Gusi already had a guess, but when he heard the answer, he couldn't help but be furious. He finally understood that Sang and Tong had already made all the arrangements. If everything went according to Sang and Tong's plan, Sang and Tong would have succeeded, and Chuli would have the qualifications to ascend the throne. However, Prince Gusi, was now back. Next, Prince Gusi led a group of Heaven Origin stage experts and 2,000 Imperial Guards into King City. At this time, in the main hall of King City, Elder Chuli was dressed in king's attire, bowing in front of an old man. The old man was holding a crown in his hand, and his expression was solemn and solemn. Chuli was in the middle of being crowned. Previously, he claimed that the two princes had given up the fight for the throne, and their whereabouts were unknown. Then he stood his ground and forcefully held the coronation ceremony. There were also many people who went to look for the two princes and even the princess consort, but there was no news, and they could only let Chu Li do as he wished. However, just as the crown was about to be placed on Chu Li's head, a guard ran in a panic. "Prince Gusi has brought the imperial guards in." Chu Li was shocked and his body fell to the ground and the crown fell to the ground with a ding sound. Chapter 392. After Leng Shiqi returned to the post house, he began to count Sang He's mustard seed bracelet. Previously there were too many people outside, so it was not convenient for him to count. When he opened Sang He's mustard seed bracelet, he found that most of them were spirit stones, and they were not ordinary spirit stones, they were almost all middle-grade spirit stones. Leng Shiqi used his mental power to detect that there were more than 1,000 middle-grade spirit stones. If converted to ordinary spirit stones, it was equivalent to about 100,000 spirit stones. Suddenly receiving such a huge amount of money, even Leng Shiqi felt a little smug. He did not expect Sang He Tong to be so rich. Of course now it was Leng Shiqi who was rich. With enough spirit stones, he would be able to use the yin and yang spirit convergence array to cultivate without fear. In addition to the spirit stones, there were countless high-grade resources in the mustard seed bracelet, but most of them were useless to him, so he prepared to give them to Nine Leave. Among the remaining items, Leng Shiqi was most happy with a ring called the Gu God ring. This was the ring that Sang He Tong personally wore. It was a grade 7 ring. This Gu God ring was also a spiritual tool, more accurately it was a treasure tool. The Gu God ring's greatest use was to allow the Gu God devouring technique to be used to the extreme, and it could greatly increase the power of mental power and spiritual skills. Leng Shiqi had secretly tested it before, and with the support of the divine Gu ring, the power of his spiritual skills had increased by several folds. In addition to the Gu God ring, there were also many spiritual tools. Leng Shiqi kept a few of these things as spares, and prepared to sell the rest to the system to open the map. The most unique among them were the cultivation methods and experiences of various Gu worms. These were the personal possessions of Sang He Tong, the leader of the Gu God sect, and their value was immeasurable. Unfortunately, the Gu God sect had been destroyed and there were not many people in Zhulu who were proficient in Gu techniques, so these things were somewhat useless. However, Leng Shiqi suddenly had an idea and murmured, "These things may be very useful." When he was almost done, he closed his eyes and began to cultivate. Leng Shiqi's cultivation had advanced by leaps and bounds, but at the same time, his foundation was somewhat unstable. He urgently needed to consolidate it. In addition, he also had many advanced spiritual skills, and it was time for him to deduce and integrate them. Thus, he used the soul-splitting technique to split his consciousness into two halves. While consolidating his cultivation, he also deduced his spiritual technique. 3 days later, Prince Gus held his coronation ceremony. Elder Chu Li, on the other hand, was placed under house arrest for the rest of his life. Prince Gus wanted to kill him, but Chu Li's foundation in the imperial court was too deep. Rashly killing him would cause him to lose the support of the people, so he could only remove him from his post and place him under house arrest. Yu Ruifeng, as the special envoy of the Thunderfire dynasty, also went to participate. Leng Shiqi did not go as he needed to settle down and could not afford to waste any time. Prince Gus, or more precisely King Gus, reorganized the imperial court in the next few days. Those who should be eliminated were eliminated, and those who should be promoted were promoted. The entire imperial city had changed. However, this had nothing to do with Leng Shiqi. On the 5th day he activated the Fate skill. At this time, he was pleasantly surprised to find that the furthest distance he could teleport had expanded from 300 miles to 500 miles. Then he directly teleported to the mountainside of the Gu God Peak. As soon as he appeared, he first checked the Thunder Destruction Array and the Golden Silk Gu that had been set up before. After finding that they were all normal, he felt relieved. Leng Shiqi opened his eyes and immediately found Princess Carol's position. However, her current state did not seem to be very good. The spiritual force in her body was almost exhausted. Beside her, there was a very weak spiritual force aura, which was probably equivalent to a spirit cultivator in the pure spirit realm. Leng Shiqi came to Princess Carol's side. Her face was pale as she maintained a seal, controlling a fingernail-sized, mottled Gu worm in front of her. This Gu worm was struggling with all its might. Seeing Leng Shiqi appear, she hurriedly said, "Zhuqiu, you're finally here. Give me some pills to recover my spiritual force." Leng Shiqi's eyes flashed and he handed over a spirit overflowing pill. This was the most suitable pill for spirit aperture realm cultivators to recover their spiritual force. Princess Carol also showed a trace of surprise. She opened her mouth and swallowed the pill. Her face also had a touch of red. After a long while, the strange goo worm finally settled down and finally drilled into Princess Carol's body. Princess Carol took a deep breath and said, "Fortunately you came. Otherwise all my efforts would have been for naught." Leng Shiqi also saw that Princess Carol was almost unable to collect the goo worm due to insufficient spiritual force. However, he was puzzled. Was that weak-looking goo worm the legendary Goo King? So he asked, "Princess Carol, did you successfully cultivate the Goo King?" "Yes." Princess Kahlua replied, "This Goo King is the one that survived after countless goo worms killed and devoured each other in several goo worm caves. I used an ancient secret method to refine it and finally succeeded. However, the Goo King has just been born and is still very weak. It still needs to devour many rare resources to continue evolving." "I see." Leng Shiqi was also a bit surprised. The Goo King born from so many goo worms was actually so weak. As if sensing Leng Shiqi's thoughts, Princess Carol said with a serious expression, "Zuochuyu, don't underestimate the Goo King. Even if it's very weak now, it still has the ability to restrain all goo in the world. After I use it to absorb the goo poison in my mother's body, I will give it to you." Leng Shiqi was silent for a moment. "I don't think there is a need to go through so much trouble." Princess Carol immediately became vigilant. She said solemnly, "Are you going back on your words?" "No." Leng Shiqi shook his head. He stretched out his hand and took out the gold thread goo that was hidden in Princess Carol's body. Princess Carol's heart calmed down a bit, but she did not relax her vigilance. Leng Shiqi said, "There is something you might not know." Next, he told Princess Carol everything that happened on the peak of Gushin Peak. He described it from the perspective of an ordinary person. He did not hide anything. She only needed to ask around and she would know. However, when Princess Carol learned that Bess had died an unnatural death and Gus had succeeded the throne, her mind went blank. It was as if her sky had collapsed. In fact, it was true. Her parents were the king and his wife, and she was the princess who was loved by everyone. But in just a few days she lost her parents and her noble status. In fact, as long as she dared to show herself, Gus would send people to kill her to prevent future troubles. Her sky had indeed collapsed. Princess Carol could not help but spit out a mouthful of blood. These days she had been cultivating the Goo King with all her might. Her goal was to detoxify Princess Beth. This was her belief. However, this belief had already collapsed. It turned out that everything she did was useless. Princess Carol said in a mournful voice, "You already knew, didn't you?" Leng Shiqi did not speak. "Yes, you just wanted the Goo King. If you had told me earlier, I would not have cultivated the Goo King. Ridiculous, it turns out I was a chess piece in someone else's hands from beginning to end, being used all along." Her voice became softer and softer. Leng Shiqi could even feel a trace of desire to die from her. However, Leng Shiqi said to her, "Do you want to take revenge?" Princess Carol abruptly raised her head and glared at him, her eyes filled with boundless hatred. Chapter 393. Seeing the hatred in Princess Carol's eyes, Leng Shiqi knew she no longer had the will to die. He said, "Actually, you should know that if you and Princess Consort interfered in the fight for the throne, you would likely end up like this. Even if Sang Hetong did not kill Princess Consort, she would have died at Gus' hands sooner or later. You should be glad you hid in this goo worm cave, otherwise, you would have died long ago." Princess Carol knew Leng Shiqi was speaking the truth, but she did not want to hear it now. She said darkly, "What do you want to say? Have you ever thought about why Princess Consort interfered in the fight for the throne? Why do you think she chose to work with the pro-war faction after knowing she was poisoned? This is like asking a tiger for its skin, but she still did it." Leng Shiqi looked into Princess Carol's eyes and continued, "She did it for you. If I am not wrong, Princess Consort's original intention is for the pro-war faction and the pro-peace faction to both suffer losses, and she will benefit from it. If her plan succeeds, do you think it will be her or you who will sit on the throne?" Princess Carol bit her lips, her shoulders starting to tremble. Every word Leng Shiqi said seemed to stab at the weakest part of her heart. But Leng Shiqi did not stop. "Therefore, only by ascending to the throne of Zhulu country can you truly inherit the will of the king and Princess Consort. You can truly take revenge for them. And I can help you. Haha. Princess Carol laughed bitterly. Throne? I am alone right now, I have nothing, how can I ascend to the throne? It is simply a fantasy. You cannot do it now, but that does not mean you cannot do it in the future. You can take a look at this first. Saying this, Leng Shiqi took out a mustard seed bag and threw it over. Princess Carol subconsciously caught it and opened the mustard seed bag to take a look. Her pupils shrunk as she showed a shocked expression. This mustard seed bag contained all of Sang Hetong's Gu refinement techniques. There was even the next level of the 10,000 Gu spirit devouring method. Princess Carol knew how precious these things were, but she was even more shocked. How did he obtain them? Leng Shiqi stood with his hands behind his back. He did not explain but said, Your Highness, there are some spirit cultivators who cultivate Gu techniques in Zhulu country. With your talent and the support of these resources, you can establish your own sect. Furthermore, with your means, you can hide your identity and take up an official position in Monarch City. This way you'll have some followers both inside and outside the city. Of course, this is not the most important thing. The most important thing is that you are a princess and have the right to inherit the throne. When the time is right, you will have the opportunity to overthrow Gus. Princess Carol's eyes flickered with uncertainty. It did sound possible, but she shook her head and said, Even if that's the case, I'm afraid the possibility is less than half. I'm digging my own grave by doing this. Of course, that's not all. Leng Shiqi smiled strangely and said, There is also a highly respected old official in Monarch City who has pledged allegiance to us. Although he is under house arrest now, the foundation behind him is still very deep. When the time comes, he will be a great help to you. Although Princess Carol had not come into contact with the outside world, from Leng Shiqi's words, she could guess who that person was. It must be the previous elder, Chu Li. She could not help but be surprised. The other party could actually rope in Chu Li. How many unimaginable methods did they have? In addition, we also have great experts in the Unity of Heaven realm. You don't have to worry about the high-end battle strength. When the time comes, you can contact the royal family and gain some strength. In this way, you really want to overthrow Gus. Princess Carol's breathing became even more rapid. Clearly, she was tempted. Even though the possibility of that happening was still very small, it was still possible. However, she did not let it go to her head. Instead, she frowned and asked, Why are you helping me? Why are you interfering in the battle for the throne of Zhulu country? What do you, or should I say, what do you want? Leng Shiqi raised a finger and said, First, you must give me the Gu King. Princess Carol nodded without hesitation. The Gu King was very precious, but Sang Hetong's Gu refinement technique and the 10,000 Gu spirit devouring technique were more important to her. Leng Shiqi raised a second finger. From now on, I will send people to collect some Gu worms from you every once in a while. Princess Carol understood that the other party wanted to use her to nurture Gu worms. However, this matter was going with the flow, so she agreed. Finally, Leng Shiqi looked deeply at Princess Carol and said meaningfully, After you successfully ascend the throne, you need to join our organization. Hearing this, Princess Carol's eyes widened slightly. She understood everything. It turned out that the other party did not really want to help her ascend the throne, but wanted to use her to indirectly control the entire Zhulu country. What great ambition. She even thought that even if she really became the king in the future, she might be secretly controlled by the other party. Leng Shiqi saw through her thoughts and said, Princess Carol, don't worry. Our organization is not a sect, but a loose one. Everyone gathered together for mutual benefits. We won't restrict Princess Carol in any way, nor do we want to plot against Zhulu country. We just want a place to live. We will help you take revenge and ascend the throne, and you will provide us with a place to live. Speaking of which, Princess Carol is the one who benefits. And the things in this mustard seed bag are my sincerity. Princess Carol closed her eyes, seemingly hesitating. Leng Shiqi was not in a hurry, he stood at the side and waited quietly. After about a quarter of an hour, Princess Carol's eyes suddenly opened. Her eyes were filled with determination. She only said one word, Okay. Hearing this, Leng Shiqi smiled and said, Princess Carol made a very correct decision. Princess Carol suddenly seemed to have matured a lot. She raised her hand and released a Gu worm. It was the Gu King. This is what I promised to give you. Leng Shiqi put away the Gu King with a smile. Your Highness, the throne is not something that can be achieved overnight. We all need to slowly accumulate strength. Therefore, in the next few years, you must lay low and secretly cultivate your forces. That is the way to go. Leng Shiqi did not want Princess Carol to expose herself in her eagerness to take revenge, so he specially reminded her. After that, they set up their contact signs and went their separate ways. The reason why Ling Shiqi would help Princess Carol take back the throne was not empty talk, it was really possible. Sang Hetong had already planted a mind-controlling goo in Chu Li. Sang Hetong was dead, so Chu Li became an important trump card in Ling Shiqi's hands. In terms of battle strength, he also had Tu Deng. Moreover, he could mobilize the assassins of the Blood Garment Pavilion. Presumably, the Blood Garment Pavilion was also very interested in secretly controlling Zhulu country. Of course, the most important thing was Princess Carol's identity. Even if Princess Carol were to openly seize the throne, the Sky Origin Stage experts of the Hall of Worship wouldn't interfere. That way they wouldn't have to deal with the most troublesome force. Moreover, Ling Shiqi had tentatively scheduled this matter for a few years later. By then, his strength and influence would not be weak, and Zhulu country would be his target. Chapter 394. The next day, Yu Ruifeng brought Ling Shiqi and a few Dark Thunder Guards into the palace and finally began their purpose for coming to Zhu Road country, which was to hold them accountable. Actually, at this time, it wasn't that important to hold them accountable because everyone knew the truth of the matter. All of this was done by Sang and Tong behind the scenes. Therefore, this accountability became a formality. In the end, Zhu Road country paid a considerable amount of resources and left the matter unsettled. For Yu Ruifeng, although Gus, who was in the pro-war faction, ascended to the throne, Zhu Road country had lost a large number of experts and imperial guards. In the next few years, it would be impossible for them to cause any more trouble. At least he could answer to the higher-ups. After that, Ling Shiqi followed Yu Ruifeng on the journey back to West Desolate Province. When they came, there were more than 20 people, but when they returned, there were only 6 left. Therefore, their speed was even faster and they only took 9 days to return to West Desolate City. As soon as they returned to West Desolate City, Yu Ruifeng plunged into busy matters. They had to carefully consider and report the information of their trip to Zhu Road country. In addition, in the month that Yu Ruifeng left, there was a thick pile of official documents piled up in West Desolate Province. It was enough to keep him busy for a while. Ling Shiqi and Guan Feihong rested in West Desolate City for a day and prepared to return to Lanqi City. Before leaving, he specially went to say goodbye to Yu Ruifeng, who knew that Yu Ruifeng would make a decision that surprised Ling Shiqi. He actually wanted Ling Shiqi to be the Great Supervisor of the North County. And the current Great Supervisor, Duan Chun, planned to be transferred to the South County to fill the vacancy of Yuan Song. This matter was of course a good thing for Ling Shiqi, but he still had a trace of worry in his heart. That was, why did Yu Ruifeng do this? If it was to win him over, he had already given him 10% of the cultivation resources in the Gu God sect. Now, not only did he give him resources, but he also wanted to give him an official position. This was a bit too solicitous. Yu Ruifeng was a dignified inspector, yet he was fawning over Ling Shiqi. This made Ling Shiqi suspicious, so he said modestly, "How could this humble servant be qualified to assume the position of Great Inspector?" Yu Ruifeng explained, "During this mission in Zhulu country, the elites of the Dark Thunder Guard suffered heavy losses. The South Region's Great Supervisor Yuan Song has died. However, the current inspectors in South County were either too inexperienced or did not have enough cultivation, so it was best to transfer a senior inspector over. Not long ago you destroyed the Profound Yang sect, so you can be said to be famous in the North region. Moreover, you are now at the Spirit Aperture Realm middle stage. With your ability, I believe you can suppress the North region. However, the other inspectors in the North County will not easily submit to me," Ling Shiqi said hesitantly. Yu Ruifeng said meaningfully, "That's up to you. Just don't make a big deal out of it." With this, Ling Shiqi smiled in his heart. He cupped his hands and said, "Since Sir trusts this humble servant so much, then this humble servant will accept this position. However, this humble servant has a small request, please allow it." "Jim? Let's hear it." "It's like this. My lord, you've seen how this lowly one obtained his cultivation. This humble servant's cultivation is not very stable right now, so I want to go into seclusion for a while to consolidate my cultivation." Yu Ruifeng lowered his eyes. After thinking for a while, he said, "Okay, I'll give you 3 months at most." "Thank you, sir, for your understanding." A few days later, Ling Shiqi and Guan Feihong finally returned to Lanqi City's Dark Thunder Manor after more than a month. When they stepped into Dark Thunder Manor, Wei Guan, who had been promoted to Dark Thunder Guard, saw them immediately. "Crush, The books in Wei Guan's hands all fell to the ground. He ran over in surprise and shouted, "Sir! Sir, you're finally back." When Leng Shiqi saw Wei Guan's surprise and relief, his heart tightened. He asked, "Did something happen in Dark Thunder Manor?" Wei Guan opened his mouth, but his expression dimmed. He didn't know what to say. At this moment, Qian Ming, Qiu Qing and Xiao Qian heard the commotion and rushed over. They all had gloomy expressions. When they saw Leng Shiqi, they finally dispersed. Something really did happen. However, Leng Shiqi was still very calm. He said, "Let's go to the meeting hall and talk." After they took a seat in the meeting hall, Leng Shiqi directly asked Qiu Qing. He was the most qualified person here. "Tell me what happened." Qiu Qing muttered to himself as if he was organizing his words. "Sir, not long after you left, Yu Zimo came looking for us." "Yu Zimo? Who's that?" This name sounded familiar to Leng Shiqi, but he definitely didn't know this person. Yu Zimo is also a supervisor. The area he is in charge of is adjacent to ours. After he arrived, he immediately asked us to give him half of our monthly tribute. Leng Shiqi's expression sank. His spirit aperture realm 5th layer cultivation was uncontrollably activated, and a formless spirit pressure was released. The others were surprised and delighted. When Leng Shiqi was in the spirit pulse realm, he was able to fight against spirit aperture realm experts. Now that he had broken through to the spirit aperture realm, Yu Zimo was no longer a threat. Leng Shiqi's mind was spinning rapidly, but he let Qiu Qing continue. "Of course we didn't want to, but we don't know where Yu Zimo found." At this point, Qiu Qing's eyes flickered. He was a bit hesitant, but he still said, "He found evidence that Sir dealt with Gong Sun Bing and his cronies." When Qiu Qing said this, Leng Shiqi could more or less guess the ins and outs of the matter. That Yu Zimo was simply jealous of the windfall he made around Lanqi City, but Yu Zimo didn't have the ability to imitate Leng Shiqi's methods. Thus, he wanted to take advantage of Lanqi City's absence to interfere. When Leng Shiqi got rid of Gong Sun Bing and his cronies, he did leave behind some traces that couldn't be investigated. He didn't expect that Yu Zimo, the supervisor, would specifically investigate this matter. In other words, Yu Zimo had something on Leng Shiqi and used it to blackmail him and take away the tribute. However, Leng Shiqi thought deeper. Where did Yu Zimo get the guts to do this? It wasn't that Leng Shiqi thought too highly of himself. When he left the West Desolate Province, that was when his reputation was at its peak. Moreover, his public smuggling was tacitly approved by Yu Ruifeng. As a supervisor, Yu Zimo came looking for trouble right after Leng Shiqi left. Wasn't he afraid that Leng Shiqi would come back for revenge? Obviously, there must be someone behind Yu Zimo who was supporting him. That person was undoubtedly Duan Chun. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.